All right, so today's interesting podcast episode. I'm looking forward to this. I've been staying in Sydney for the past week, and I've been catching up with my friend Ryan, who has been on the podcast before. He's interviewed me before, and we've had such good chats the past week, just on a bunch of random different stuff. So we thought we'd just set up the mics and just have a chat and see where it goes. Essentially, talk about some interesting things, talk about some potentially controversial things, and just see what happens. So, Ryan, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on the show, James. It's great to be on the show again. When we did our interview about 6 or 7 months ago in December, we touched on some really interesting and deep topics like Vipassana, a bit of relationships, but excited to go for the deep dive, man. Let's go and hit some real gnarly topics.
Let's do it, man. So, thought maybe an interesting place to start would be the topic of lifestyle design, because we're staying, you can't see it if you're watching the video, but we're staying in this beautiful apartment here in Sydney. We rented this really nice apartment which has this beautiful terrace overlooking the leafy inner west of Sydney, and we've been watching the sunsets every night and just having a good time, drinking some wines. And I think lifestyle is something that's potentially, people don't optimize it enough, and I think that's something that you and I have very deliberately done. So I guess maybe we could start on this week. What was the motivation behind coming here, and what are we hoping to get out of it?
Yeah, it's a great question, James. I love the topic of lifestyle design. You and me sat down probably late last year and we did a life manifesto, and for your listeners, some of them will know what that was about. It's kind of designing your dream lifestyle in all facets. So things like what's your mission, what's your purpose, what cars do you drive, where do you live, what's your relationship and finances like. So it's about holistically designing, I guess, your life. And part of that, you could call it life design. We do these mastermind retreats every few months where we come together. It's like a mini MBA, you could say. We bring our problems, things we're working on, and that we can brainstorm off each other, but we aim to make it a holistic thing. So we'll get in a hike, we'll get in meeting some friends, you'll do some podcast interviews while you're here and make the most of it. And to me, it's really the ultimate of lifestyle design. A lot of people, I feel, when they're making goals, they're thinking of material things like how much money should they make, what's their job title, and maybe external things, but they never really thought about the lifestyle. And for people like you and me, I think one of our strongest motivators is freedom. If we take, say, the four motivators, materialistic / money, mating, mastery, and status. What sticks out for you and me, I feel, is freedom. And it's an interesting topic because some people may argue there is no such thing as freedom. If you're running a business, you've got responsibilities to your clients, to your customers, and when we speak about freedom, we're not talking about the lack of responsibility. If anything, it's the ownership of that responsibility, but it's the medium in which we're putting our effort towards, so say we're free of a 9-to-5 job, but that might mean we're working 8 to 8. So back to the topic of lifestyle design. It's very interesting, man. This week's been fantastic. As you've introed, we've done a lot of things like hiking, podcast interviews. You've been on your mission. I've been on my mission. We've been working through things together. So I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's so good, man, because one of the things about this place that we're staying, we're both commented, it's like so good because we've got this beautiful place here. And then, you go downstairs and you've got this street of shops and cafes. There's some really nice coffee. You can just walk there. You can do whatever you need to do. And there's something to be said for that, to like kind of test different lifestyles, test different areas. This apartment we're staying in now, maybe we wouldn't like want to pay to rent this permanently, because it would be quite expensive. But, if it's something that we see ourselves doing in the future, ideally, in like an ideal life, it's good to like test that, go look at the car you want to buy one day and sit in it and like start it and see how it feels. Go stay in the apartment that you want to stay at one day eventually and just see what it's like, experience it. Because that's one thing I've learned. It's like the first step to actually getting something is you first have to actually see that it's possible, and then actually experience it and be able to visualize what that actually looks like. And then you can actually start taking steps towards making it happen. And like you said, man, freedom of time and location is something that's really important to me. And probably like you said, man, like during the week, we just went for a hike, like down by the coast, you know, beautiful scenery, beautiful scenic place, Royal National Park. And it's like, you know, we both work hard and we work hard on our projects, probably arguably harder than we've ever done like a job or anything like that. But, you know, the fact that we have that freedom to then be able to, on a Thursday or Wednesday, whenever we went, you know, go for a long hike in the sun when it's the middle of winter here, you know, take advantage of that.
Yep.
Don't be stuck to someone else's schedule. And that's a really powerful thing. So
It is, man. Yeah, you raised a good point on visualization. I feel that some people talk about visualization as in manifest what you want to manifest by thinking about it, by writing affirmations. And I think you raised a good point. That is powerful. But the next level is to actually feel it. And that's something, you know, we've discussed many times over, say, the past 18 months is, you know, rent an Airbnb for a night or 2 nights, or like we've done here for a week, you know, spice it up, make, you know, kind of live your dream life for a week. Go test drive cool cars, go and eat nice food and hang around nice people, because when you feel that feeling deep inside of you intrinsically, it motivates you. And that's what I believe the true visualization is. And then you're able to attract and manifest that into your life.
yeah, it's true, man. And it's like, yeah, once you see things, and that's like the first step to believing them. And I experienced a similar thing like when I did the meditation Vipassana last year. You know, it's like people say that like happiness is in the present moment or whatever, but when you actually experience that and see it for yourself, then you realize it's possible. And it's the same with what we've done this week, you know, this lifestyle of living in a great place, in a great location, meeting cool people, having great conversations, having a good time. Like we've actually done that now. So yes, it's only 1 week at the moment, but now it's like, well, how can we do this 1 week a month, and then 2 weeks a month, and then 3 weeks a month, and then eventually all the time, you know? So this is the first step, and then we'll just build it from there. So yeah, I guess, was there anything else about lifestyle design that you learned this week, or anything that you were sort of testing that you were happy with, or that surprised you, or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question, James. I think being in different environments is helpful. Last time we did this, we were staying in the outer west, near the water, you know, a lot of running tracks. This time it's been a bit more convenient location. You know, we've got this beautiful sun that we've been sitting out and, you know, masterminding, doing some work out there every day. So it's a holistic package, man. You know, it's been good to see everything in its elements, and you know, add a lot of social, I guess, activities into it, which is cool, because I know you and me, we work very hard on our projects and things, and especially this journey can sometimes be a bit lonely. So having that social interaction built in is important, and if we can, you know, schedule and systematize it in a way like we've done this week, it's fantastic. You know, work during the day. You know, work hard, maybe sometimes go for a run, go for a hike, and then, you know, finish the night off with some great social activities, have dinner with friends, interview people for the podcast. I think holistically it's been fantastic, and yeah.
It's true, man. And that's an important word, I think, holistic, because that, like, again, you need to be able to define what you want out of life. And, you know, for us, we really heavily do value that freedom and that flexibility. And I think a lot of people say they say they value that, but you look at their actions and how they've designed their life. Because here's the thing, like, even if you don't consciously sit down and say, I want this life, you're actually still designing your life. It's just you're letting other people dictate what that looks like, you know?
That's right.
And like, I've been guilty of it in the past as well, you know? You kind of just fall into whatever degree, whatever job, you just kind of leaf in the wind, just blowing around, like just taking opportunities without actually thinking about whether you want them and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been good to really be deliberate and sit down and make sure that we're actually doing the things we want to do, you know?
Totally, man. And that's why I love lifestyle design as well, because maybe it's something we'll get into a bit later in the episode. We talk a lot about happiness versus fulfillment, and there have been times in my life, and I'm sure the same for you as well, that we've discussed, where you can feel these burning feelings of unfulfillment. And I think it's because deep down we know we're not fulfilling our purpose, our mission as men in our lives, and we can feel that. And this week has been great, man. Lifestyle design, you know, all the elements. You know, we've got our money going, we've got our projects going, we've got our social, and have had a rest. We've gone outside, plenty of sunlight and all that. And I think that is the key to fulfillment. If you're able to integrate all of those parts, because it's like the four burner theory from James Clear. He talks about it's kind of hard to have four burners. Let's say you have health, wealth, love, and happiness slash fulfillment. It is hard at times to keep all four burners going fully, and that's something you've talked a lot about, and we've talked about over the years, is that, you know, balance is an important virtue and value for you, but there may be times in life when you have to go, you know, a bit harder at work and that your health might sacrifice. But in the long term, you're able to, I guess, yes, have these four burners holistically integrated and, you know, systematized and all going well. And I think that this week has been a good example of that. And, you know, I think we both feel very fulfilled and happy at the same time, which is the goal that we're seeking out of life.
Yeah, that's right, man. And yeah, it's a good point, because balance is important, but the balance is, it's an ever, you're constantly trying to get back to that balance. I feel like it's like something's always going to be out of balance, and then your job's to make sure it doesn't get too far out of balance, you know. Like there's been times, especially the past few months, like I've really neglected a lot of like the social and the kind of fun side of things, and I've been more in like the work and, you know, my health as well, because I've been very good with my routines and like my habits and around health. But you know, this week was definitely, it probably went a bit more towards the social and like the fun side of things, which, you know, I wouldn't actually want to do that consistently. You know, it's good to do that, but this week's been exhausting in some ways because of some things that have happened. So, you know, like it's good to do that, but now I'm also thinking it's going to be good to bring that back into balance as well, and, you know, focus more on the health again. Like I've had some good wines and good chats, but, you know, focus on that again and make sure that I'm in as strong as I can be. And so, yeah, it's really about, you know, testing, pushing different levers and testing and seeing what sort of balance works, and then always trying to refine that, I think, is the key. Because I think a lot of people will be out of balance and they just stay out of balance. And for a lot of people, the balance is either too much to like fun and just like partying or whatever, and they don't think about the future at all. Or the other way, it's like we were talking about before, some people are just like, when do I buy the next property? Like building my empire, like all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, there needs to be a balance between both, you know?
I agree. And I think naturally, as humans, we tend to feel that. I don't want to go too deep into the, I guess, things like depression and whatnot, but sometimes I've felt, and I haven't necessarily been depressed before, but I feel that sometimes when we do have those feelings, it can sometimes be our body or just ourselves telling us that something's out of balance, something's not right, or even deeper, we could be avoiding something internally, which we've kind of buried, and we haven't kind of dealt with that and brought it to the surface, like emotions and things like that. So I think... I think ourselves, we will always know how we're feeling. And that's something, again, something a bit different, is to kind of be in tune with our emotions. And, you know, you've done this quite a lot in the past year with Vipassana meditation and, you know, going within. And we've both done and focused a lot on inner work. So going within our beliefs and our charges and all these kind of things, and truly understanding how we feel. Because when we can release those charges and all that, then we can really get all the synergies that we're doing from this lifestyle design.
Yeah. Agree, man. So it's a good exercise to do, and yeah, we've had a good week. So, but yeah, one of the things I really enjoyed about this week is that we've had so many wide-ranging discussions and topics, and it's funny, man. Like we were talking about it before, but for the people listening, like me and Ryan have some of like the deepest and longest chats about a bunch of different interesting topics, and it's funny, man. Like I feel like that doesn't happen enough for a lot of people, and it was the same for myself in the past, and part of that was because I didn't prioritize it, and part was just because it's hard to find people who are like on that same sort of wavelength as you. But when you do, and you have like these people who think similar ways, but it can also challenge you about things, and you know, you can have these like debates and discussions and go deep, then that's something I find very fulfilling, and we've had a lot of good conversations the past week. So what were some of your favorite topics that we talked about? Maybe we could dive into some more.
Yeah, dude. To echo that, it's so true, man. It's so good to go deep and talk about a lot of different topics. And again, to further that and what you said, you know, running like thoughtful disagreement, like an idea meritocracy, like Ray Dalio speaks about. That's so fulfilling, man, because you're able to take a point that you believe in and challenge it with someone who can challenge your argument. And the purpose is to find the best argument. We've had some great chats this week on wide range of things like parenting, marriage, relationships, fulfillment versus happiness, bit on health. We've chatted a wide variety. So, yeah.
It's been great stuff, man. What's I think parenting is an interesting one. What how do we start on this? So I guess with parenting, it's good, man, because you get to observe there's a few people in your life who are going through the parenting journey. None of us are parents yet, but it's something that we think about, I think, for in the future. And because here's the thing, man, like parenting is, if you get it right, and I've seen this in so many different people in my life, if you get it right with the parenting and you do all the right things for the kid, that gives them such a massive boost up in life. Like, parents are always trying to say like, oh, like I want to get them to the best school or do all this stuff and buy them all this stuff and get them in the right university, whatever the case may be. The reality is like that stuff means jack shit, really. The main important thing is like, you know, to build them up emotionally and make sure that they have good character and sort of strong ethics and morals and be able to be an emotionally solid place to be able to attack life, you know?
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening for most people is that they spend their first like 20 years of their life getting fucked up emotionally, and then they spend the next, like literally the rest of their life unfucking all those things that happened in their early years.
Yep.
And so imagine if you've got a kid and you can make sure that by the time they're 18, they've been like parented amazingly well, and they go into life with this really solid emotional foundation, and they can do a lot of things, you know? And I don't speak from this of like any like criticism of any parents or anything, because like reality is like I have no idea what it's like to be a parent, so I can't like criticize anyone. But it's just something I think about, because when that does happen to me, I want to make sure that I understand it and have all the tools that I can implement to give those kids like the best head start in life, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
So I just observe and try to see what to do and also what not to do, you know?
So true, man. There's so much to talk about this. We'll start the deep dive on this. I think the first thing is that parents, sometimes they have an expectation for the child to, say, be well behaved and to eat their vegetables and do all these things. But I think firstly, parents have to look at themselves. Like, what are you doing? You know, if you're drinking Coke and your kids have drank Coke before and you want them to stop, but you're still drinking Coke, you're not modeling the right behavior. And what I feel is that your kids are an extension of you. So whatever you're doing, they're going to pick up on. And kids are very smart. That's why, you know, I'm blessed to have two young siblings at the moment going through this, so I can witness the parenting journey. And yeah, it's just fascinating, man. I love kids, you know, for many reasons. They're very cute, but they also show your own bullshit, you know. If you're, you know, dicking around and you're modeling bad behavior, they'll call you out on it, and, you know, they'll know something's weird, and, you know, it's a great way to build self-awareness in a way.
Yeah.
So I do think modeling good behavior is very important and is paramount. And the thing with parenting, man, is that it's a good thing to study. I mean, we don't necessarily sit down and study it, if it sounds like that, but we have a keen interest. And, you know, say in the next 10 years or so, we might be both parents or we may not be, but I think it's a lifelong thing, and you have to kind of start thinking about it long ahead. You know, I don't believe you can, you know, read a book, you know, 6 months or 9 months before, because you can pick up a lot of the tactical stuff, but some of the stuff is foundational, and it's something we'll get into a bit later, I guess, on inner work, you know, going in and looking at those emotional charges that you have inside you, and how does your inner thoughts and feelings, how is that manifesting in your behavior? Because the reality, as we said, is you have to model good behavior first, and if you can, you know, integrate everything we've said so far, like lifestyle design, and you're holistically integrated internally, I believe you'll be able to be a great parent. And not to say that you can't be if you don't have those things, but if your goal is to do that, and I think that's you know, we have a similar goal of really being intentional with parenting and really understanding it. So, and then, you know, obviously being a good parent or good parents ourselves, I think is quite important. It's a lifelong thing. And the second thing I always think about is the emotional development of the child. So you've got the parental obligations. Some parents or most parents are going to focus around, we need to bath the kid, we need to feed the kid, we need to take him to school or take her to school. And that's great. Sometimes I feel like that's a bit more like guardian role, they've got to take care of the child. But the parent's responsibility is to foster and harbor a safe environment for their kids emotionally, so they can, develop themselves in that way. And there's a lot of things that will come out of that, a lot of byproducts, like emotional traits like patience, things like instant or delayed gratification, things that will harbor on and manifest themselves later in your life, like an attachment style in relationships. Will you be anxious? Will you be avoidant? Or will you be secure? A lot of that stems out of the first, say, 5 or 6 years from your childhood. So more than ever, man, I think it's so important for us to think about. And if you think, and if people listening, if you guys think about how you were parented, there's a lot of clues in there. And I think that, so much to talk about with it.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. It's like there's two things that spring to mind when you said all that. First is like, it's true, man. Because I actually saw it. I've told you about this. I was walking down the street one time, and this like father was like taking their kid across the road. They were crossing the road, and then the kid like started crying, and the father responded by basically being like, "Oh, why are you crying?" Like just like telling the kid off for crying.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just remember seeing that, and I was thinking, oh man, like that's the start of the decline of that kid's like emotional health, because the parent was just like not like responding to the kid's emotional needs. It's like, of course you don't want to like put up with all the kid's crap all the time necessarily, but the kid had like was feeling an emotion, and the parent was like denying that feeling. And there's a really good book called How to Talk So Kids Listen So Kids Talk. And one of the things they say about that is like, one of the worst things you can do for a child's emotional development is to deny their feelings. So what that means is like, if the kid's crying, people do things for reasons, even if it's a weird reason. Like, kids do a lot of weird things, but, if a kid's crying, there's some reason why they're crying. It's not just random. Like, there's actually a reason that they're crying. And if all you do is like tell a kid to shut up and stop crying without actually like helping them work through their own feelings and understand them, they start to associate like expressing their own emotions like fully and expressing who they are. They start to associate that with punishment and like a bad thing. It's like a bad thing to do that. So they start to distrust their own emotions. So it was just interesting. I just saw that interaction, and there's no criticism on the person because I don't have any context of their life, but it just shows like these seemingly small things just have like potentially such a large impact over someone's lifetime. And I'm sure there's not one person listening who's been like perfectly parented, and that's not like a criticism of anyone's parents. It's just a reality that we don't have perfect lives, but the less you can fuck up your kid, especially in the early years, it just gives them such a huge advantage later in life. So I think that's super important to do.
Definitely, man. Yeah, there's a good book I actually posted on my Instagram last week. I found it at home, actually. It's called How They Fuck You Up, regarding people's parents. And on the back, there's a little blurb. It says, if every parent read this book, it would do more good for society than any government, stimulus package or welfare policy out there. It's so true, man. I mean, again, it's not a criticism of anyone's parenting, and I really believe that most parents do the best they can with the resources they've got. And sometimes it's just like a lack of education, or, there's been big developments in the field of like attachment theory in, say, the last 20, 30 years. We know so much more about, how childhood affects people growing up these days. Another thing, I guess, a book we've both read is The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. It's a fantastic book. I guess the main tenet from it, or one of the main messages from it, is a delayed gratification and instant gratification, and how the behavior can be formed in childhood. Simple things like, as a parent, do you listen to your children? He talks about this 5 stages. Obviously, one of them is not listening at all and pretending to listen. And then the other side of it is listening with intent and with care and being fully present in the moment. And it talks about it. And it doesn't necessarily say you need to always do level 5 all the time and give all your attention. But I do believe that quality time is very important. If we look at the love languages, quality time, spending with your kids. And it doesn't have to be a long time. Like, I believe if you can spend 2 hours and really play with them and, really, harbor a safe place for them to share their emotions without judgment, without criticism, and be fully present in the moment, that will be so much better for them than, say 8 hours of subdivided attention where, you might be on the phone and you've got other tasks to do, and all those kind of things. So you're right. I think it's nothing revolutionary. I think it's just look at how you're doing your actions and see how, you could harbor or foster a safer place for the children.
Absolutely, man. And it's so true. It's like that's the most important thing. You look at, like, some people have the best intentions in terms of like wanting to provide the best life for their kids. So maybe they fall out of balance and like skew too much towards like gathering resources and money and making sure they can pay for their education and all that kind of stuff. But it's been shown that the thing that the child values the most, especially in those early years, is love and attention.
Yeah.
And so they don't care if they're rocking up to school in a Porsche or like a shitbox Toyota. It doesn't matter to them. That's more like the parents' ego. They want to be able to rock up and like show the other mums like with their fucking Porsche Cayenne or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, it's just like that's something that's so important, I think. And I don't think I have all the answers, but it's like that's what I want to understand for myself. Like, what are the actual important things that actually have an impact? And I do this for everything, man. Not just this topic, but like for business, for my health, whatever. It's like there's usually only a few things that actually have a really high leverage impact on what you're trying to do. And I want to be able to discover what are those things and how do I maximize them. Like, does it make a difference if I'm making $500,000 a year or $1 million a year? Like, is that going to help me with my goals? Is that going to help me like raise like children? Is that going to help me like live the lifestyle I want? There's no right or wrong answer, but it's like a question I want to ask. Do I want to put in that extra effort to make that extra money? Is that going to be the highest leverage activity? And I think it's just important questions to ask, and it's not always like more is better.
I totally agree, man. I mean, going back to lifestyle design, the way that, you're currently working, I think it's fantastic. We're both, doing similar things, working online. We're still putting the hours in, but we have this flexibility of schedule. So if we need to do something during the day, we're able to pop out. We don't have a boss that we need to answer to all the time. So I think it's quite powerful, man. I mean, what do you think? Let's say you got two parents, they're both, corporate workers, and there's nothing wrong with that. But let's say they're doing 9 to 5 plus travel time, and then say they've got 2 or 3 kids. That can make it hard to, I guess, work around that because, sure, you've got daycare, sure, you've got school and whatnot, but, if you put the kids in, it can, how do you balance it out,
Yeah, it's a hard one because then you're right. Like, you're kind of, in a way, you're outsourcing the parenting to someone else because the kid doesn't have doesn't clock in and clock out for like development. Like, development is 24 hours a day,
Yep.
So if you're gone for a lot of that time and then you got old mate down the road at the kindergarten who's like done nothing with his life, and that's the one who's like teaching a kid like what to do. That's potentially a problem. So I don't know. It's a hard balance, and I guess it comes down to. This is why I put so much focus on like lifestyle design and defining what I want, because a lot of this isn't necessarily the case, but for some people it's like. They like, here's an example. If you want to live in Australia, let's say as a household you make like 100K or something, you could do that. Like, you could live a life on 100K, or you could also live a life on 500K. And the difference between those two, it's like lifestyle creep. It's then the golden handcuffs. People start to make more money, and so they buy more stuff and live more expensive lifestyles. So it's kind of like a lot of people haven't defined exactly what they want. And so they kind of fall into this trap of just more. And then you actually get rid of your freedom and your flexibility and put on those golden handcuffs. And then it's hard to undo that and go back. So that's why, like, right now, I feel like I've done shit all. Like, I'm still so early in my journey. But, as I start to get a bit more, I want to make sure that I'm actually working in the right direction. And this is something that I did wrong in the past, and which I've like recently adjusted. I just like fell into certain things in certain areas. And, what I always say, like, one of the worst things in life is, you're climbing the ladder of success and you get to the top and then you realize it was against the wrong wall the whole time.
Wow.
And so I feel like that was kind of what I was doing in a lot of different areas. I had my ladder against the wall and I was climbing it and I was getting some results, but then I realized it was actually against the wrong wall, you know? And so what I've done really the past 12 months is I've like come down, I've like torn down that ladder, I've put it against the right wall, I've defined what that wall is and what I want. And now I'm starting the process of climbing that right wall, you know? And so, yeah, I think people really just need to make sure that they're not falling into things and they're being deliberate. I think that's one of the biggest things to keep in mind, you know, just be deliberate about what you're doing. You know, like things happen outside of your control and in circumstances outside of your control, but I think the more you can have some sort of compass and plan and stick to that within a few degrees, you know, the less likely you're going to fall into these situations where you have these issues that you didn't realize were going to come, you know?
Yeah, so true, man. I love that. Being intentional, it was one of the biggest lessons I had last year for myself. And, you know, Jim Rohn says if you don't have much plan for yourself, nobody does either. And the last thing you want to do is, you know, I guess fall into the plans of other people and, you know, they're going to manipulate you, not always consciously, but in things that serve them the best. And you never want to have that for yourself. And, you know, I think even for myself, when I look back, just, you know, going to work, studying, coming home and doing all those things, that wasn't even intentional. That was just, I knew I needed to do that. But now when I bring in other factors like lifestyle design, and I think of, you know, we both think of 5, 10, 20, 50, and we've also got the concept of a 900-year time horizon, like a legacy. What are you going to leave behind? It's important, you know, and we're not just thinking about what are we going to eat next Saturday or, you know, who are we going to go out with, all that. We're thinking like, how can we build this empire? How can we, you know, holistically bring everything together? And it's something that I'm so interested in as well, because I'm lucky enough to get to witness this parenting journey myself. You know, obviously I'm not a parent, but I've got some younger siblings, and something that I find interesting is that, you know, just systems in place. I've seen it. It's not hard as a parent. There's so much to do. Like, if you imagine you've got to go to work, come home, you got to cook, you know, you're going to spend quality time with the kids. And then does that mean you don't have any time for yourself? Do you want to have a bit of time to rest and relax? I do think that's also important. And obviously your own mission, and which might be tied into your business or other hobbies you do. So I think more than ever, it's important to have these systems in place and make sure that you're fine-tuning them and optimizing them. You know, not to get too nerdy or analytical, but I do think it's important because if you don't, you'll be scrambling, and that's the nights where you find, you know, you might be getting 4-6 hours of sleep because you haven't done you haven't, you know, been organized with your time, and you haven't done all these things. So
that's the thing, man. Like and you can think of it in terms of parenting and also in terms of like business. Some of the best business people, or the most people who have the most results, and who I see as like the best business people, they're actually the least busy or the least stressed. And it's actually the people who are doing less output that are super stressed and just working super hard. And it's because they lack that discipline in those systems and they haven't taken the time to deliberately design that. Because, you know, like I used to work around people who have done very well in business, and they've got a lot of projects. You know, they're literally running multiple companies, you know, doing big things, sitting on boards of other companies, like all this stuff. But they're very like deliberate, and it seems like they're not really doing much because they're not working like super hard and frantically. But it's actually just because they've set up everything in a structured way. And I feel like it's the same with anything, man, like business, personal life, parenting. To a degree, there's always unforeseen circumstances, but to a degree, you can systematize things, and it takes a lot of the stress out of all those projects, you know?
That's right, man. And that's it. Really, being a parent, it shines the spotlight on you directly. It's the catalyst that, you know, accelerates the forces that were already present underneath. Like, if you have great systems and you have a great lifestyle design and everything is running smoothly, and you add parenting, and it just speeds that up and it shows you what was happening already. It's so good, because you don't know what's going on, you know. Like, I mean, if you're one person like we are right now, you know, we don't really have that many responsibilities, which is good for the most part. However, there's another side to it, is that, you know, we may become complacent with our life because we have so much time. There's no real, not saying there's not a drive, but, you know, we have no dependence yet. So there's nothing to, you know, force us into really systematizing things and getting things running smoothly. But as soon as you add kids into the mix, you instantly, you know, everything is put to the limits, and you got to test out what you've got, and it will show you. If you're disorganized, you'll be exposed for that, and you'll see, very quickly you'll be tired and you'll be disorganized, and you might be unfulfilled and unhappy. But if you've got great systems in place and all that, then it'll be a lot smoother, and that will show it. So I think it's a great catalyst there.
Yeah, dude. And it's a good point because and here's the thing, like, people might listen and say like, oh, these two like single dudes like talking about like parenting or whatever. But I know people who are parents, and I know people on both ends of the spectrum, it's like people who are stressed all the time and see the downsides of and all the freedoms they've lost and all the negatives of having a kid. And then I also see people on the other end of the spectrum who, yes, they acknowledge that it's hard work and, maybe they don't sleep as much, but they're actually coming from a place of like fulfillment, and they see like the joy in it. And, it's not actually, they're working hard and it's a lot of energy and work, but it's different. It's like they're organized and things work well, and they look for like the good in it, the joy in it. They're not focusing on like the downsides and the negatives. So that's just something I observe, and I try to do that for everything in life. There's always, no matter what happens, there's always like a good side and a bad side, and you can choose to look at either. And I'll just always try and look at the good side if I can.
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, the stuff that I mentioned earlier, I guess on the relationship attachment style stuff, that's so interesting. I mean, we'll get into this topic as we transition into it after. On relationships, it's so interesting. We're a big firm believer, both of us, that romantic relationships are one of the most high growth areas you can have in self-development. And some people say don't date at all, focus on your work, focus on your mission. But the way that we see it, or the way I see it as well, is that romantic relationships, they teach you so much about yourself and your patterns of behaviors underneath, and just simple stuff like are you organized, are you prepared, when certain things happen, do you get flustered, does it take you off balance emotionally, all these kind of things. So
yeah, dude, I can say with 100% confidence that all the major growth experiences in my life, or the biggest growth experiences, have all come about due to romantic relationships. So it's crazy, dude. Yeah, so it's an interesting topic. What there's a lot we could talk about here.
Yeah.
Have you got any other thoughts on parenting, or?
No, not too much. It's quite a deep topic, and obviously we're not parents. We're just studying it and working it out, and it's just common sense for the stuff we're learning about. And I think it's tied holistically into relationships. If your relationship is strong and it's stood the test of time, and you both are on the same page and the same values and all that kind of stuff, it will also help your parenting journey. From what I've seen, many other people. When both parents are not on the same page, or they're both they're not connected in a tight relationship, you could say, emotionally, that's when things can split. So it's like in business they say culture comes from the top down. Same with parenting, I believe. If you have two strong parents who are working together and they're on the same page, that will definitely help your parenting as well.
For sure, man. It's interesting, dude, because it's almost like it's almost like stages. You've got, first of all, you have to fix the relationship with yourself, your own relationship with yourself. And then once you kind of have that, you can then add another person and create this relationship. And then it's almost like that needs to be solid before you then add a child. This is like ideally. And most people don't do this. Most people skip the first step, which is like the relationship with yourself. And this is something you and I have spent a lot of time on the past year, or even longer than that, but more so definitely the past year. Like, it's so important because this is the thing, like a relationship is so complicated, and like it can be, if you get it right, it makes your life, it can take you to the moon, but if you get it wrong, it completely fucks up your life. Like, you see it so much, man. Like, we talk about plenty of people we know who, it's just fucking train wrecks, dude. Like, and it's always comes from like, they skip that first step of like sorting their own shit out. No one's willing to do that like deep inner work where you look inside yourself, you see all this bullshit that you have, and you address it and you face it. It's like, it's hard to do that. And there's like things that I've done that have helped me do that. And like, I'm not perfect. Like, I've still got shit I have to do, but you know, even compared to like 12 months ago, it's crazy. Like when I think back to how I was just a completely different person, man, like emotionally and spiritually. And, you know, in the past year, I've done so much deep work. You know, I did Vipassana, which is something you'll be doing soon. I've just spent a lot of time like reflecting and by myself. And this is the thing, because people get by themselves, and the first thing they want to do is just fill that void with someone else. And it's absolutely the worst thing you can do. And, you know, like I was in a long-term relationship that ended about 1 year ago. And, you know, it would have been easy for me to just say, all right, let's just find someone else. You know, like this isn't pleasant, like sitting in my own thoughts and like my own feelings. So let's just numb that. We'll find someone else, have some fun, whatever. It's just like, it's actually like the worst thing you could do for your spiritual growth. So that's really been, up until recently, that's really just been my focus on myself, just getting that relationship with myself right. I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about that as well. How's your journey been?
Yeah, it's been interesting, man. Again, romantic relationships, I couldn't be more grateful, man. Like, they've really been the catalyst that have, you know, driven me to do so much inner work. And I think the first step of everything in life is awareness, having that awareness of your current state and of what's going on. If you're not aware of it, you can never fix it. Yeah, it's just interesting. I mean, it's helped me see a lot of things about myself, and yeah, I embarked on this you know, you could say inner journey for the last, say, 7-8 months, even 9 months. And as you said, I'll be doing Vipassana. So I'm looking forward to that, man. It'll be good to go through the whole thing. But yeah, man, I've just gone back to first principles earlier this year in January, you know, going and thinking, and I guess you could say studying, like how does anxiety work? How does anger work? Things about boundary function, all the things that, you know, the first order stuff, or the first principles of how they manifest in you. And it's so true what you bring up, man, that, you know, it's so easy to distract yourself these days. I mean, you can pick up your phone, start scrolling Instagram, and you distract yourself. You've got TV, you know, you've got 10,000 plus subliminal messages coming at you from, you know, advertising, billboards, other people speaking, and it all enters your unconscious mind, which means that we don't really, if we're not intentional about it, we don't actually give ourselves time to sit down and to ponder, man, to think deeply about what's going on. And that's something that we've talked about this week. And that's why Vipassana is so fantastic, because you got that 10 days away, no phone. Sounds a bit weird, but you can't even look people in the eye. No journaling, no books, and you sit down. And by doing that, you're forced to go within and have that true understanding of your current state of feeling, current state of being. I think that's so important, having that awareness. And once you've got that, then I guess having the tools to go in and to clear out the things from before, like things from childhood, as we mentioned, that may be manifesting itself in your behavior. The attachment style stuff is so interesting. You know, if you're parented in a certain way, like you mentioned before, that story of the kid who was getting screamed at because his dad was denying his emotion of why he was crying. That kid may turn out to be an anxious or maybe an avoidant later on, whereas a kid who has that emotional bonding and has that, you know, connection, especially with the mother, that may, you know, lead them down a completely separate path into a secure attachment style. And by having that, you know, they'll be able to, you know, enter relationships from a place of abundance instead of a place of lack. You see that? I mean, if, you know, people, I've dated a few anxious people, and I've dated, you know, an avoidant person as well. And I've seen, you know, I guess the different ends of the spectrum. And it's so interesting how it plays out, man, because it really goes back to first principles. It goes back to parenting and all that kind of stuff. Some of it is out of your control, and there is hope. You can change your attachment style. But understanding these frameworks, you know, particularly when parenting, but more so, I guess, when you're in relationships and understanding, okay, you know, there's frameworks like the 5 love languages. You've got things like, you know, relationship attachment style, hexagon, all these other things, which are so interesting, man. And I think, yeah, to echo what you said, you know, the deep inner work is so important to go within, because adversities are great in life. You know, adversities can teach us so much and push us to that next level where we need to be at a certain point in our lives. But there are times as well, even for empaths, you know, I consider myself an empath. You can feel emotions quite strongly at certain times. And, you know, obviously from strong adversities or from things that might have happened in your past, that can create wounds which you need to heal. And, you know, as I've experienced this year, yourself as well, it's not easy. You can spend 6 months healing, and There's just, so much work to do. And it's such a blessing because I really believe that, in order to get into a good relationship or a fulfilling relationship, you almost need to be in a state where you don't need anything. You're totally fulfilled by your being. You love your life. Your life is just fantastic and you don't need someone, but adding someone in creates that additional depth where you can, take each other to the moon, grow each other in that union with poise and stability.
Oh man, that's so good. It's so true, dude. Like, it comes back to intention, and it's like a word that you and I talk about a lot. Like, what's your intention? Why are you doing this? What's the motivation behind it? So many people have the wrong intention, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. The intention, people won't admit it, but a lot of people's intention is, I feel sad and I feel lonely and I'm horny and I want someone to be with. And that's like their intention that they take into a relationship. And reality is that's coming from a place of lack, So I always use the analogy of like, you could build like the most beautiful like house. Like you go down to the coast and you can have this like amazing property. You can build a beach house, like 2-story, like infinity pool, beautiful, beautiful house. But if you've built it on a swamp, it doesn't matter how beautiful the house is, it's going to fucking sink eventually,
Yeah.
Same with relationships, man. It's like that foundation has to be solid, and the foundation is your own inner state. And coming from a place of being secure in yourself and not needing anything from anyone. Mm-hmm. And as soon as you get to that point, life becomes so good, man, because this is something that I've experienced recently. It's like, I'm not perfect, but I feel like I don't need anything from anyone, And when you don't need anything from anyone, you filter out so much bullshit and so many train wreck people, because like people who are coming from a place of like attracts like, always, man, always, especially in romantic relationships. There's never a case that I've seen or heard about where one person is a complete train wreck and one person is normal. The market's efficient in the long run. It might be the case where there's a normal person is just in a bad spot for a little bit, so they attract someone who's like a bottom feeder, Yep. But eventually that will end. The only things that last a long time are when two people are on similar levels of like spiritual growth and personal growth, And so if you are secure in yourself and you've done all that deep inner work and you don't need anyone, you're actually not going to be attractive to these like low level people. Yeah. And when I say low level people, it's not to like disparage them, but people who aren't as like emotionally developed or they're not as far along in their own journey as you may be. Yeah. And it's funny because I thought about this for a while, because when I've been like interacting with some women, I would think like I'd interact with some and they just wouldn't, like I wasn't getting any results. And I was thinking, why is that? Because I feel like, I've still got a lot of work to do, but I feel like I'm like a fairly high quality person, overall. And I was like, why is this not working? Why is there nothing happening here? And, there's a few reasons for that, but one of the reasons is a lot of these people were just not on the same level, And I'm not saying I'm better than them, but I could just tell like they still had so much inner work to do, so many things that they need to work through themselves. And, that's not saying anything bad about them. It's just we're on different levels at that point in time. And those two people on different levels are not going to come together. There's not going to be that attraction. And so I was actually coming from a place of lack in a way, like wanting that to work. And so again, that highlighted like work I needed to do. But then I can see now it's just like, yeah, you have to be on that level where you're completely fulfilled by yourself. And then you can look at adding another person.
I agree, man. Yeah. That's why I think one of the highest states or forms of being is being equanimous, and that's what you've taken away and taught me from Vipassana. It's fantastic, man. So much to it. I guess the art of detachment, in the sense that, you can be with someone and you love them and care for them, but if they have to leave for some reason or something tragic happens, you're not turned into a complete train wreck and you just break down and all that. And it's so much easier said than done. I don't say it with any authority or whatnot, because I'm still learning to master that myself. But having felt those feelings recently, and I know you have as well, being equanimous is powerful, man. You don't need something from anything, from someone or whatnot. It's like when you date someone, if as you said before, some people, as soon as they break up, they feel they need someone to fill that void. And it's sad to say, man, but you can always predict the outcome of the quality of their relationship, or if they'll even be with someone in the future, is because they haven't done that inner work. And you said like attracts like. So that's why I really believe, for young people, I'm 23 right now, you're a little bit older than me. One of the best things we can do, I guess, in order to attract the best or the highest quality woman or someone who's just good for you, on your level, is to do the work on yourself first. And this is something I think a lot of guys don't necessarily want to do. People want to shortcut the learning curve. They want to, maybe just, go to the gym, pump the muscles a bit, use some pickup lines, use some outer techniques and things like that. And the truth is, yes, that does work in the short term. You can fool people with lines and you can put it on an act and manipulate them. But in the medium to long run, as you said, the market's always efficient and people will see straight through your bullshit and who you are. And I've seen people who've done this before and it's ended in, divorces and terrible outcomes. And I really believe that,
That's right. Eventually, if you focus on the external, then eventually you run out of external things, Like, yeah, you can dress well, you can look nice, you can speak in certain ways and do certain gestures and touch people or whatever words. But at the end of the day, that works in the short term, as you said, but eventually people discover who you really are. You can't hide who you are inside forever. You can do it for some period of time, sometimes, hours, sometimes minutes, sometimes hours, sometimes months, sometimes years, but I always believe it, man. The truth always comes out eventually.
Mm-hmm.
This is something we've spoken about before. It's like people can pretend and they can project certain things, but the truth always comes out. Like, even if it's, let's not even take like romantic, like let's talk about business, just to give an easy example. Someone can get ahead in the short term, and we've seen people like this who, just fuck people just to try and get short-term results for themselves. And it works in the short term and it looks like they're winning, but it all comes unraveling eventually, People get exposed for who they are because eventually they fuck the wrong person or they, just mess up, they get exposed and it all comes crashing down. It's exposed for what it is, which is just a house of cards.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with like focusing on external techniques. This is the beautiful thing, man. And this is something, because I've been guilty of that in the past, focusing too much on external stuff, Do I have a nice car? Do I look good? Like, do I work out? Do I, speak confidently, whatever. All this external stuff, which, sure, there's nothing wrong with it, but my internal state wasn't right,
Yeah.
Like, and people see straight through that. Like, some people don't, but they're not the people you want to have in your life because they're on an equally lower sort of level, So if you really do want that high quality partner, you actually have to be a high quality person yourself. There's no shortcut around it. There's nothing you can do in the short term or like take some shortcut. You just have to do the deep inner work. But here's the beautiful thing, because once you've done that hard work, it actually doesn't matter what you do. If your inner state is fine, your outer state within reason can be anything. It doesn't matter what you say. Like, you can say stupid things like, or you don't have to sound like the smoothest, or you don't have to look like the best. You don't have to drive a certain car, whatever. It actually becomes almost irrelevant because people who are equally high quality can tell when someone is on that same sort of level. And that's how you have to go about it. There's no choice.
That's right, man. It comes from that intention. If you have a solid inner state and you've worked through your stuff, you're right, it manifests through your behavior. It manifests through your intention, through your subcommunication, and you become magnetically attractive. You're right. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you wear. I mean, within reason. But yeah, it's become magnetically attractive. I mean, look, for young people like listening, something I've been thinking about and we've chatted about quite a bit is, when you're, say, for ambitious people, if you're between, say, 18 to 25, and you could even extend that to, say, the late 20s, it's a high growth stage. And we've talked about this before. When you're in a relationship, you do have an obligation, of commitment to the other person. You can't just put your shit in the car and drive to Melbourne if you're in Sydney and just live there or, go off the grid for a bit. And in a way, some people might argue that kind of hinders or limits your freedom or your ability to grow. And that's something that I've thought as well, obviously being 23 right now, And obviously looking at relationships, and if I'm looking for a certain long-term relationship, I've got to understand, and people have to understand that firstly, you're changing as a person. Secondly, the other person's changing. So even if one person's changing, that kind of changes the dynamics, and you're both growing. So you're elevating your status, you're elevating your education, you're elevating everything. And by doing that, sometimes that can shift the ego defenses, it can shift the boundaries and all these things. What do you think? I mean, we've talked a little bit about this before. Do you think that it's hard to be in, say, a long-term fulfilling relationship, that you can take someone to the moon and back at such a young age, say between 18 to 25, because, you're both moving at such incredible paces and maybe in different directions?
Love the question, man. It's such an interesting topic, and there's no like concrete answer, I feel like, but I think it's very hard to, like, I've seen it before, so it's not impossible, but it's very hard to have a healthy, fulfilling, long-term relationship that lasts like your lifetime. I think, especially for ambitious people, if you're in your early 20s, or like even in your 20s at all, like, it's hard. And like, I fall into this trap as well, because you find someone who is great, and you enjoy spending time with them, but you're so right, like, you're both of you are so early in your journey, you haven't actually defined exactly what you want out of life yet. I think very few people have a concrete, tangible vision so early in life. Like, I'm still defining exactly what that looks like. I got quite a lot of clarity, but there's still areas I'm kind of exploring. And you're right, man. If you're in a long-term relationship, you can't be reckless. Like, you can to an extent, but you can't just do crazy things like move to Singapore tomorrow because there's a good opportunity, like you said, or drive to Melbourne, or whatever the case is, And you might say to yourself in your head, like, oh, like, yeah, that is true, but like, I will, if I need to make hard decisions, like, I will. And you can say that, but subconsciously, and this has actually happened to me, like, you're less likely to look for opportunities, because that deep down that's going to be like a high friction thing. Whereas like the past year, I've just been like, every opportunity that comes along, I'm just like, boom, let's go, like, let's do it. Executing just hard, because like, what else do I have to do? Like, I don't need to like respond to anyone, And so I don't think it's a fulfilling state to be in forever, like, to be by yourself. I think it doesn't mean, it's like we were saying before, like, dating, like romantic relationships, that's where you're going to learn the most about yourself and other people as well. So it's worth doing, but it's really, really hard to, here's the thing, here's how I look at it. So if you have absolute clarity on what you want to do, and you find someone who supports you in doing that, then that's perfect, and that's what you want. But I think very few people, especially at such a young age, have that actual clarity that they need. They're still exploring, they're still tasting things, If you're just like studying, if you're in uni and you haven't even like started going out to the real world yet, like, how much have you really experienced, and how much clarity do you actually have on what you want to do? It's probably going to change. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but when you add that extra complexity in your life of a relationship, it's like adding a child, It's not impossible to do great things like with a child, but it just means it's harder, and you have less flexibility. Like, I could fuck up something and lose all my money and like be on the street, and I wouldn't even care, because like, I've got no one that's relying on me. So I have like that freedom to like take big risks. And sometimes that's what it comes down to, It's your ability to be able to take high risk, high return opportunities. And not all of them are going to work out, but eventually you're going to hit that one that does. But, if I had a kid or something, no way I'd be doing some of the stuff I'm doing now. But I can honestly see that in the next few years, some of these opportunities I'm taking now are going to be very lucrative for me. But I'm going to look back and think, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had dependence or whatever the case is. So.
Wow. Yeah. So powerful, man. It's so powerful, especially for high growth individuals. And, I guess I can easily kind of extrapolate it in my mind and see that, let's say for a hypothetical couple, if, there's an opportunity of a lifetime, but they also don't want to give up this relationship. And, I really believe you can't do two things at 100%. Something has to give, whether it's, temporary or permanent. You don't want to end up resenting the other person if you missed an opportunity. Like if you have say an exchange program abroad, or you've got a fantastic job opportunity and you need to move, next week. If you're on your own, sure, you might have a place, or you might have some possessions which you can sell. But if you've got someone else, you've got to, consider them and whatnot. And that's the last thing, you don't want them to hold you back from growth. And it's not an easy thing to consider, because I guess it comes down to the individual. Do they prioritize the relationship, and is that more important to them, or is this opportunity more important? And I guess not everyone is going to be, corporate climbers or wanting to take the next best opportunity. It doesn't mean you always should, but it's something that, I guess you should consider. And Jordan Peterson, he says, you've got to pick two things. You can either, if you want to do well at work, you can go all in 150%, be a corporate climber and, achieve great things. But if you want to do that, it's very hard to be, say, a successful and good parent at the same time, because you're putting so much effort into it. So you've always got to pick, do you want to do that? Or maybe you just decide, okay, I want to coast, I want to, have this job or have this business or whatnot, and maybe go at 75, 80%. So you're still doing quite a lot, but that frees up some of your resources and time to be a parent.
And then it can also be a case of just building that foundation, because I think this is something that a lot of people get wrong. It's as they progress in like their career and their life, they take on more responsibility and put in more effort, when actually you kind of want to be the opposite. Like you want the hardest working period and the highest kind of growth period to be initially, and then you kind of want to set things up so that, and this is how I think of, and you and I are similar, as more, I guess, kind of business operator mindsets and like, systems thinking. It's like, sure, we have to scramble and like work hard and hustle at the start to get everything going. But then once it's going, how do we actually sort of remove ourselves from that as much as we can, so that we actually free up our time for whether it's the next project, or whether it's a relationship, or whether it's a child, or whatever the case may be. Whereas a lot of people are like, all right, I want to start at this level, go to middle management, become CEO, whatever the case is. Their workload's only increasing over time, rather than decreasing. And that can potentially cause some friction when, maybe you don't want to focus so much on work and you want to focus on other things in your life, but, you kind of get used to that $2 million a year salary or whatever you're on, and it's like, It's hard to go back.
So interesting, man. It's something that we discuss as well. You brought up the concept of golden handcuffs before. We're both at such a young age and, an early stage of our development. And I think success, everyone has a different version of success, but I think you can apply it to many people, is that mitigating loss, mitigating failure is almost equally as important as, becoming more successful and, rising up. And, one of the worst things that, people early on in their journey can do is, to go out and get that expensive car, to get those golden handcuffs, especially when you haven't, got that money in the bank because you're tying yourself down. And that's something we talk about a lot, like minimalism, not having too much liabilities and all these kind of things. I think it's quite important, because by doing that, it's a choice. And by doing that, you're limiting your upside for opportunity, because you're not able to, execute and take it when it might be there. Like there's been times in the past where I've had an opportunity, for example, to go to Ty Lopez's house as part of one of the things I bought from him, but I didn't have enough money in the bank to buy a return plane ticket there and back. So, you never want to be in that position, I guess, where you have to turn down opportunities because you don't have the resources to fulfill them. And I really believe that, in life, we might only get 3, 5 or 7 or a very limited number of like truly good opportunities that, are game changing and that are, super important.
Yeah, that's right, man. Yeah, we want to be able to have the liquidity and flexibility to execute on them when we can. So I get that, man. And I was curious, because one thing you said before that I wanted to come back to was you were talking about anxious and avoidant relationships, and I don't know, I think it'll be fun to go a bit maybe specific here in a few different arenas. So I mean, we don't have to mention anyone specifically, but I mean, have you had some experiences in the past with either one of those types of people? And I guess it'd just be cool to explore what that is in terms of like an attachment style and how you sort of saw that manifest, and I guess, like lessons from that. So maybe if we could start with maybe an anxious relationship or romantic experience you've had, and I guess what you learned from that.
Yeah, dude, I love going deep on this stuff. Yeah, the anxious one is interesting. So I guess the anxious attachment style is occupied by someone who maybe, described as clingy. They're always, anxious. Maybe they're a bit concerned, that if you're not around, they'll get a bit anxious. They'll get a bit fearful, and all this. So yeah, I won't mention names, but yeah, it's the thing with an anxious avoidant. Sorry, the thing with it, yeah, you can have anxious avoidant, but the thing with an anxious attachment style is that you can often end up very easily falling into a codependent relationship. I think there's two or three states you can have. So obviously one's codependent, the other one is interdependent. So codependent is where you're both clinging onto each other. You both you need each other to survive or whatnot. And the other version of that, or the opposite, is an interdependent relationship. So that's obviously ideal, and it's where both parties are on their mission, they're on their, on working or whatever, they've got their own fantastic, fulfilling lives. And again, as we said, they don't need each other to complete each other. They're really happy. And what that means is when they come together in a union with poise and stability, they're able to take each other to the moon and back because they're not leeching off each other. So with anxious attachment styles, they tend to, if both parties are anxious, it can result in a codependent relationship. So I guess my experience of that is, I experienced, a bit of clingy behavior. And when I look back into the causes of that with that person, it definitely was from their childhood. And, even that person was experiencing some troubles, in their current life with their family and whatnot. So, yeah, I think that.
And yeah, I guess with that, so that interaction, yeah, obviously we don't have to talk about specifics, but I mean, like, what would you say, maybe a better place to start would be like, what do you see you as, like your attachment style, and has that changed over time?
It's a great question, man. I see myself as a secure attachment.
Has that always been the case?
I'm pretty sure, man. Yeah, it's always been the case. I think the main thing, deep down, I'm secure. Around certain people, they can activate different parts of me. So some people, I might be a little more avoidant. Some people, I might be more secure. I don't think I'm very anxious in the attachment style. Yeah. And
okay, so was when you experienced that interaction with someone who was more that style, like, were you kind of aware of it, or was this something that was like a new experience for you to see that, or how did that play out?
Yeah, great question, man. I actually didn't know about relationship attachment theory until recently. That's when I started my inner work journey. There's a great book called Attached by Helen and Levine, I think, and it's fantastic. It talks a lot about the science of it. I wasn't aware of it, what it was, and I think that's one of the dangers. I mean, it's also one of the great things about being young and going into relationships is that, I guess it was almost like I was entering a minefield and I had nothing to go off or to protect me. It's dangerous in a way because you just, two people meet, and especially if you don't have any frameworks to go off or any experience even, you go into it and, you don't know what to expect. And obviously there can be conflict and you don't know how to handle that. And, it's like entropy, in the long run. If you just, things decay naturally over time, and if you don't work at it, consciously, it will just get worse. And that's what did happen in that relationship. And when I was able to, I guess go back and reflect upon it, it was very clear that there's many elements to it. Obviously, attachment style, she was anxious, I was secure, but also things like love languages. And we talk a lot about energy balance. So the masculine, feminine energy balance. That was also, I guess, off, as you could say.
That's almost like, it's almost a good checklist for a relationship compatibility. It's like you want to have your attachment style sorted and that of your partner secure as the ideal. You want to make sure that you don't have to have the same love languages, but you want to make sure you understand your partner's love languages. What is it? It's like gifts, words of affirmation, physical touch,
acts of service,
and something else. But yeah, so there's 5 love languages, and everyone sort of responds differently. So knowing what your partners are is important because it's not always going to be the same as yours. And then energy balance as well, making sure yeah, and something we can maybe talk about a bit later as well. The masculine feminine energy balance has to be in balance. If it's not, then as far as I'm concerned, it's doomed to fail. So, yeah, that's a good, I guess, like checklist to have for a relationship.
It is, man. There's so many checklists and things you can look at. There's also the 16 personalities, Myers-Briggs. So you've got like ENTP, INFJ, and all those kind of things, and you can do that. And I find it to be quite accurate for romantic relationships and understanding. There's another app that you and me like called The Pattern, which is, I don't know how it works. It uses, I think, your time of birth, place of birth, and all that with some horoscopes, and you can kind of look at timings and stuff. And while it isn't always accurate, I've found it to be pretty interesting. And then the other stuff is like Hexico, which is kind of a new version of, or a new and improved version of the Big Five, which Jordan Peterson talks a lot about. So Hexico in the emotionality part, you can look at things like, their dependence and their emotionality and their anxiety and all these kind of things. So yeah, I guess you don't want to fall into the trap, and it can sound like, we're just using tests and things to assess people, which is not the case. And I always think, your best bet is to just go with your gut feeling. Obviously have some, if you can, some frameworks to go off, and experience always helps, but just use your eyes. And we always talk about, fine tuning our bullshit detectors. And, the first time is going to be terrible because you're going into the minefield with no protection and no knowledge or nothing. But
just make sure you actually use protection.
Yeah.
What's it's so funny, man. Because that's the thing. And this is why I think things like dating and romantic relationships, like, you just learn so much about yourself. And as you said, like, fine tune that bullshit detector. Because here's the reality. Like, I'm not saying like we're above like the majority of people, and like I still think I have a lot of work to do myself. But most people who are like actively on the dating market are absolute train wrecks, man. Like, for the most part, and
on those apps like Tinder.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a few reasons for that. I mean, coming back to attachment style, it's like we've spoken about this before. You're more likely on these apps for various reasons to find people who are, anxious or avoidant rather than secure attachment styles for a few reasons, anxious and avoidant styles tend to recycle through the dating pool more often. So secure people who, that's kind of what you want. They're either in relationships or they're single, but they're not looking for someone because they're working on themselves and healing, and then usually they end up finding a new relationship through like a referral from someone else. They're more likely to do that rather than be actively dating on the market, which means there's just, not saying that there's no secure people actively dating, but you're less likely to find one than some of these other less desirable attachment styles. And so, it's fascinating. And so that's why it's so good, because you can meet different people and you can kind of learn more about people. You will never learn more about people and reading people and like trying to understand people better than through romantic interactions. Like, not only will you learn about other people, you'll also learn a lot about yourself. And it's a real like test of your emotional fortitude as well. Because here's the thing, man, like, there's been times in the past where, there's been people who I've been like talking to, and it's just like, and this highlights like the lack in me, and that shows that this wasn't something I should be doing. It's like, it affects me so much. And it's like, you're talking to this person, you think they're like amazing, and you have all these like ideas in your head of what that person should be, and you project all these things onto them, and then you just find out it's just like false, and then it just like destroys you emotionally. And so, to be able to go through that process but remain equanimous and like see things objectively, it's such a big growth opportunity. And especially the past like 6 months, man, I've learned so much about that whole process. So love to hear your thoughts on that, and maybe you can ask me a hard question as well now if you want.
Yeah, dude, there's just so much to talk about. It might not have too much structure, but I guess to go off what you said about, how has my experience been with an avoidant person? It's completely different, man. The avoidant person tends to steer away from any kind of close emotional intimacy. They don't want to get close. They don't really want to define things. And obviously that comes upon, I would either say, stems from lifestyle factors. They might have had really bad relationships in the past, or it can also stem from that lack of emotional intimacy as a child. And as you said, man, you're right. Secure, the book, as it talks about, secure is, I guess you could say, the best type to date. If you're an anxious, you should go for a secure. If you're avoidant and you go for secure, they probably won't last long, because the secure won't put up with that and they don't attract each other. And then you've obviously got the other combinations. So you got anxious avoidant, which can be terrible. You got anxious anxious. But you're right. Avoidants are more likely recycled into the dating pool more, and they're just out there more because they don't have compatibility with people. And I guess that kind of stems upon another question which we've been discussing, is where do you find high quality women? Obviously we've been looking on and off across the time between when we've been doing our work, and then we've taken some time out to really focus and hone ourselves and make sure that we're solid internally. And it's an interesting topic, man, because I think people on dating apps, if we want to find a true high quality woman, the chances of finding them on one of these apps is very low. I'm not saying there's no chance, but it's like going to the dance club to look for your wife. It's not the best place to look. So, we've chatted a bit about maybe, referrals from people, or maybe you meet them on the street, cold approach, or they're definitely out there. And, even looking back to business, man, you've interviewed some great people for the podcast, and these people, man, you don't find them all over social media running ads and stuff for the most part. Like the real achievers they're hustling, because a high quality woman, I believe she's either with someone, so she's taken, or she's working on herself, she's taking some time out, or if she is in that dating pool, she gets snatched up really quickly because she's such high quality.
Yeah, dude, it's a it's a tough problem. And just to clarify as well, when we say like high quality woman, we could say the same for men as well. It's equally hard to find a high quality man, but we only date women, so we'll just talk from our experience. But it's true, man, and it's something that like we've been experimenting with ourselves, and I think is really interesting to see, because it's like it's really hard, because sometimes it is just like a numbers game in terms of like where you're going to find people. And like you said, like on these apps and stuff, reality is there's just like less high quality people on them. So probability wise, if you just look at it from a maths equation, you're less likely to find someone on there. And so, I don't know, man, like it's, from what I observe, like places, you want to go places where people who are high quality in your definition of what that is are, I think. So, if you care about your health and your well-being, and you're quite a spiritual person, maybe like doing yoga classes, or like a gym, or some sort of meditation place where you can actually talk to people, I guess.
Yeah.
Not Vipassana. But, those sort of areas would obviously be better. And it's tough though, and it's still something that I'm trying to work out. But I think honestly, man, and this is probably like the biggest thing that I'm thinking right now, I don't have any like evidence, but I actually think that, like for myself personally, when I think about, where's that high quality relationship going to come from, I actually believe it's probably going to come out of serendipity and through my network. If I had to put money on it, and if I was a betting man, that's what I would say, because as you start to build like a high quality network of friends, you obviously have high quality friends who are a reflection of the quality that you are. Like this starts internally, so you have to first become a high quality person.
Yeah.
You then attract other high quality people into your network, and then obviously they know a lot of high quality people as well. And so that's what you're saying before about how like these high quality people, they usually get snapped up real quick. And it's like the best jobs, man. If you want a job, only the shittest jobs that no one could fill through their network are advertised on Seek. If you want like the actual good jobs, they all come through referrals, because they're just like the leftover, the clearance rack of jobs.
Yeah.
Much like some of the dating apps are like the clearance rack of people. And so, just like, I think I would say that's probably where it's going to come from, And it's almost like, that's the thing, like, and we were talking about this the other day, when you're kind of like prioritizing something or chasing something, you're probably not going to find it. So the way I see it is almost like, all right, this is probably going to happen at some point. Maybe it's 1 year from now, maybe it's 10 years from now. If it's 10 years from now, I'm more than willing to wait. But I want to get exactly what I want. I don't want to compromise on what is arguably the most important decision of like a romantic relationship, a romantic partner. Because, you know, like I've got like big plans for my life and I want someone to come along with me, and I want to make sure that's the right person, you know? So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, dude, it's so interesting. I mean, yeah, Warren Buffett says that as well. He says that, you know, your spouse is, you know, probably arguably one of the most important decisions you'll make in your life. And I mean, just echoing, yeah, what we've spoke about today, I think it's really complicated. It's hard to drill, even down with, you know, theories and things like that. We've talked about attachment style. We've talked about, you know, Big Five and Hexago. We've talked a lot about, 16 personalities and, you know, all that kind of stuff. I think that there's so many moving parts to a relationship, man. Firstly, you know, once you find someone who's high quality, or, you know, when you're in that stage where you're, you know, looking for someone and whatnot, you can meet a lot of people. You can meet 5-10 people, but when you, at the end of the day, you know, when you actually think about it, it is a bit of a numbers game, because there's so many variables that have to be right. Like, we talk a lot about non-negotiables in our life manifesto, and what are essential qualities for our woman. So, you know, obviously one of them for myself is that she supports me on my mission, my vision, / you know, also my contribution to the world, and that's something that's, you know, non-negotiable. But I think that things like values, they're also non-negotiable, and you can have, you know, a perfect partner or potential partner like on a resume, and, you know, they tick all the boxes and they seem to be great, but then you've also got to consider, you know, do you guys vibe? You know, can you go into good deep conversation? And there are so many things that I think people like ourselves with high standards, we don't want to compromise on. And that's why we've both said, you know, if it takes 10 years to find the right person, we're more than willing to wait, because in the meantime, you know, it's not wasted time. We're drilling down into our internal state. We're moving forward in our mission. We're bettering ourselves as individuals and preparing that lifestyle design. So when that right woman comes along, it's seamless, because we've spent and done all that work, you know, to make it frictionless. And we've done that hard work to build the solid foundation, instead of, you know, having that foundation built on sludge. It's been built on, you know, solid work that we've done for ourselves.
Oh man, so good. That's the thing. It's like, and here's the thing, kind of expanding on what I said before, I actually believe that it's like inevitable. So at some point, the right woman is going to walk into my life and is going to present herself. The only question is, at that stage when that does happen, will I have done the deep inner work to then actually be able to retain that person? You know, because that's like one of the worst things in life. I feel like it's like, you know, the opportunity presents itself because you fucked around and didn't do the work necessary in advance. Yeah. That opportunity disappears and never comes back, and you never get another chance to execute on that. And that's how I feel. So I feel like my job is not to necessarily like use this tactic or go to this place to try and find this woman or whatever. It's like, just train internally, like prepare.
Yep.
Get to that state where I can actually handle that person I say I want. Because here's the thing, right now, the person that I've said that I want, my ideal partner, I actually don't think I could handle that person right now. I don't think that they would see me as a good fit for them, and I would actually agree with them, because I have, like I said before, I've got a big vision for my life. I've got a big vision for my partner. But then if I have the audacity to have that big of a goal, I need to actually be able to back that up myself, you know?
Yes.
I can't be like the weakling in that dream. I need to be able to execute on that as well. And so that's kind of my job, I feel like, is just be ready.
So true, man. Yeah. Be ready, be willing to accept it. And that's the thing as well. Sometimes, you know, if we all think back to ourselves, and everyone listening, you know, the dream partner, man or woman, they might have already presented themselves to you at that stage of your life, and you may not have even been aware of that. That's a tragedy, you know. Imagine if that dream woman is there and, you know, you're not ready for it, or maybe you are ready, but you're not fully ready or whatnot, and you just, you know, you miss it. And the worst bit is, yes, you missed out on that opportunity, but back to awareness. Some people are not even aware that opportunity was there, and they missed that, you know, and that can be a real catalyst to go within and, you know, to accelerate things. But I totally agree with you. You need to be able to back it up. I was interested in maybe asking you about some of your experiences. What have you learned the most? Because we know we've had some intense discussions over the last year, and it's so interesting, man. You know, you said to me, wow, nearly a bit less than 12 months ago that you deliberately, and we talk about intention, you deliberately wanted to take at least 6 months, maybe 12 months off to really work on yourself and go within. And I think that it's really mature, man, because I don't know anyone else who actually does that. A lot of people will be looking to fill that void with the next person or the next sucker who comes along and has to, unfortunately bear them because they haven't done all that inner work. And it is sad. And that's how I feel with a lot of people is that, if they haven't done the work, they can't give them their best self to the relationship. And in a way, that's selfish, that's manipulative in a subtle way because they're not giving their best gifts to the world. And, you've had some incredible learnings over the past 6 to 9 months or so. I'd be interested, what are some of the main things that you've learned doing your inner work and all that?
Yeah, great question, man. Fuck, so much, dude. Like, so yeah, I guess for some context, so I was in a long-term relationship about a year ago, which I mentioned before that I ended, and what Ryan mentioned there, I consciously decided, it's easy to just fill that void with something, but let's not. Let's get the foundation right. Let's build that solid emotional state. Fix all this crap that was an issue because. That's the thing, man. Like, if you don't fix the crap, it just presents itself in the next relationship, Because something you've said before, which I found really profound, was, everyone knows the concept of the honeymoon period, but you can't actually know someone truly for at least 18 months. That's something you told me, which I thought was very profound. And it's true, you have to travel with them. You have to see how they interact with their family and their friends. You have to see them at their best, see them at their worst. And, that takes time. You can't just get to know someone quickly because everyone's on their best behavior initially.
So true.
But you want to see what's behind that behavior, and it takes time to reveal that. So that's what most people do. They live a cycle of, be with someone for 18 months and they're happy in their sort of honeymoon phase with the relationship. Then problems start to come because issues that they didn't fix start to arise, issues in the other person start to arise that they didn't fix, and then depending on how stubborn or ready the people are to end it, might last another 6 months, might last another few years, whatever the case, but eventually it ends, and then they just move on to the next person and repeat the same pattern over and over again.
Wow.
And that is just not something I want to do,
Yeah.
And so, I take full responsibility for everything, all my actions and my relationships. And, I saw those things in myself that I need to work on. So that was something I decided to do. But, I completely fucked up in a number of different ways because there was a stage where, I thought that I was in a place where, and it's so stupid, to actually think back. So this is the thing, when you're emotionally underdeveloped, you do fucking weird things, man. And you just it's, when you look back, you're like, what the fuck? That was the dumbest shit.
Yeah.
And so I had this experience of, I wouldn't even say I started to heal and do the work, but I, for some reason, thought I was in an okay place. So, I ended up just having interactions with someone else, and it's just it was absolutely from a place of lack and unfulfillment and just trying to fill that void. And I specifically said that I shouldn't do that, but then I just did exactly this thing that I said I wouldn't do, which was dumb, but I didn't see it at the time. And, it resulted in just an absolute train wreck of a situation,
Wow.
And even though it was hard at the time, it was the biggest blessing in the world. And I have nothing but gratitude for the person and the situation because, wow, man, I've learned so much about, we're saying, it's highest growth experiences are always these romantic experiences where you get fucked the hardest.
Yeah, wow.
And so, yeah, in terms of learnings, I learned a lot about, first of all, I learned about myself from that, what was I kind of trying to use another person to fix, and also learning about other people's intentions, learning that, because this is the thing, feel like for the most part, I tend to kind of attract fairly healthy people, like emotionally healthy people. But then, when you're in a period of not being very emotionally healthy yourself, you tend to also attract other emotionally unhealthy people. And that's really interesting, man, because I had an experience where, there was someone who I thought was one thing, but then, or I thought their intention was one thing and then it turned out to be something else, or just like different, and they weren't like who they projected themselves to be.
Wow.
And, that's taught me a lot in terms of reading people, which I think is really important. Like, again, like we said before, just calibrating this bullshit detector, like how there's so many people who here's the thing. Okay, so I learned that, yeah, it's good to trust your gut and like do that sometimes, but also when it comes to like emotional things, don't always trust your gut because sometimes, and this comes back to like the difference between like romantic love and attraction and actual love, like fulfilling long-term love, because a lot of the time when you feel like, or I should say like chemistry, because when you feel like chemistry with someone, a lot of the time that's actually just an emotional wound being triggered.
Wow.
And that was the case with me, and this is a whole another topic, but like it's a lot of the time it can stem from like childhood wounds or whatever, and where you have like your brain actually gets wired the wrong way in terms of love, because a lot of the time, like when you experience like things early in childhood, especially like from parental figures, then that wires your brain to interpret certain actions as love.
Yes.
So I'll give you an example. Like if someone, let's just say like someone's father, like, beats them or something like that, that means that kid is going to grow up thinking, their brain is going to interpret, if someone abuses me, that means they love me. And so obviously you can see how that fucks up a lot of people.
Wow.
And that's why, like, for example, like so many people fall into the pattern of going to like abusive relationships, because all it is just wires are crisscrossed in their mind to interpret like these toxic behaviors as love, and they just keep repeating that pattern. So, I didn't have like extreme stuff, but there were certain things that was like a flaw in me that I learned that, there's some people who I feel like magnetically attracted to and like really want to be with, but I actually realized that was coming from a terrible place, and it was actually wrong. It was just my brain was wired wrong. I was interpreting this thing that was an incredibly toxic behavior as love, and that's something I've had to unlearn, and change my mindset around of, don't always just, especially when it comes to like chemistry, it's not always true, it's, love is like not chemistry. They're two separate things, and you can't always trust the way you feel about someone,
Wow, dude, so much. Yeah, it's so great. And I feel the same way, I guess. Firstly, I think love, if you define love, a lot of people think love is a feeling. I think love is an action, and that's why we look at the 5 love languages. They're all actions. And yeah, chemistry doesn't always breed compatibility. Sure, it's one thing to have chemistry, you can vibe with them, but there's so many other, pieces to the puzzle. Like, what about the values? What do you guys want? Are you on the same path and all that? And a few other things, I took some points away from what you said when you said you were, you knew you were in that relationship and it wasn't for you, but you kept going along. It was almost a deferral of the pain. Like in life, I feel like we can't escape pain. Like we can defer it, we can push it away as much as we want, but sooner or later it comes up to the surface. The shit rises, and we have to deal with it. And if we don't deal with it, sooner, then it will get pushed out, and it's going to be even worse and more painful. It's like a disease. If you don't cure it, it just grows, multiplies like a virus, and it just becomes out of control. And I believe it. Sometimes things can get so bad that it overtakes your life, and sometimes it's unfortunately beyond repair. So
yeah, wow, dude. So yeah, I believe that so much, and yeah, so it's good, dude. There was a lot of learnings the past year, and I'm just super grateful for them, and I feel like I'm in a much healthier place now than I was a year ago, which is good.
Yeah, so true. I mean, what you said as well, I find that interesting because I kind of, it came up in the surface of one of my past relationships is that, yes, you might have a certain definition of love, which, unfortunately may be the wrong one. And when I say wrong, we use your example of, the father abusing the kid. That's, not right. So the problem is that if that person never has the awareness to go deep and to go within and to reform that, then the problem is, and it's such a tragedy, man, is that when someone comes along and shows them true love or more of a truer sense of love, like a genuine compassion, a genuine, caring, a passionately cool vibe for them, they can't accept that because they've never done that work to reform it. So I think that's so important. And then again, Scott Peck has some, great concepts from the book we talked about, The Road Less Traveled. When two people get into a relationship, as you said, it's a honeymoon period, things are exciting, 3-6 months, the real love, the real test of the relationship starts when shit hits the fan. You have your first major argument and all that, lovey-dovey stuff is out and it's gone. That's when you test the ability of that relationship because, yeah, it's, again, man, you learn so much about yourself, and that's, I think, one of the tenets of a good relationship is that you're able to work through the ups and downs constructively together. It's easy for two people to live together and talk to each other, but having the foresight to foster each individual's spiritual growth, he talks about this concept a lot, is so important. And sometimes in a relationship, in one of my past ones, it was tough because I wanted it to work out, but at the same time, I knew I had an obligation to that partner for the purpose of their spiritual growth to let them go. And that's something that, wow, it was a hard decision to make, but I'm proud of myself for that, going through that, because I imagine myself in that situation, where if I was unaware of something and my partner saw something that they had to do something to, to take me to that next level of spiritual growth that I wasn't aware of, I'd want them to act in my best interests. And yeah.
And again, that's true love, I guess. Essentially, it's acting in the interest of someone, either your own or someone else's spiritual growth, even if it is, even if it's not something that's like pleasant, I guess. So like in that example, you wanted it to work, so it was in a way in your interest for yourself, like you wanted to make that work and keep going, but
Yes.
You saw something that the other person didn't, that they needed to work on themselves and that potentially you need to work on as well for yourself. And so the actual loving thing to do was to just end that, because then that would create the space for both parties to get better and do the things that they needed to do. So yeah, it's hard, man. Not many people are willing to do stuff like that.
For sure, man. Exactly. And it all revolves around spiritual growth of the individual and the partnership of being able to grow it. Yeah, I've noticed a pattern, but some people say men are likely to attract their mothers as relationship partners, and sometimes girls can attract their fathers. I don't know if you can speak for yourself. What do you think of that? Because it's wounds, like you said before. That woman you were seeing before, she kind of pushed these buttons. Sometimes we can be, magnetically attracted to people who are bad for us. An intense woman, something exciting.
Yeah.
But maybe they're not the best for our spiritual growth deep down, and because they're pushing buttons from our childhood or something, from our past, or maybe even something from our parents that unconsciously has gone through our belief system or our wiring.
Yeah, I believe it, man. It is true. I think that, again, it's just people getting their interpretation of what love is through their early childhood experiences. And then, for me, like, there's nothing like serious, but there were things that, as with everyone, I think there's things that aren't always ideal. And then that kind of just manifested itself in this situation. But it's just like, yeah, it's crazy because I see it so objectively now. And this is something I'm so grateful for. And, like we have conversations on a regular basis around these sort of things, like challenges we're going through, and it's an interesting topic around like pedestaling people as well, because that's what I did with this person. I like saw a projection of who they wanted to project themselves as, and then any gaps I filled in with my own sort of like projection of them, which wasn't based on anything other than what I like, came from like an immature place of just what I wanted them to be, not what they were. That's one of the most important things, man. It's like, just see people for who they are, and you know what they actually demonstrate, not what you want them to be or what you see that they could be. Because I think that's a big problem that a lot of us have, where we see the potential in people, and we see who they could be, and we're like, I want to help them get there.
Be the Messiah, right?
Be the Messiah, and you know, like, be the person who like saves that person and helps them in their growth. But the reality is, like, it comes back to the first stage of getting your shit together. You can't get someone else's shit together. Like, if someone wants to grow, they have to want to do that. You can't like force someone else to change themselves. And it's very immature for you to think that someone should change, you know? If it's like, there's a great quote by Neil Strauss where he says, like, you know, you have to love someone and accept them for who they are and not want them to change. And then if they happen to change for the better, then that's just a side benefit. Like, you can't like enter a romantic relationship with someone by saying they're great, they would be perfect if this, you know? It has to be, they're perfect as they are now. And it's not going to be like perfect, but it has to be, you have to be willing to accept those flaws, you know? They have to be perfect for you as they are. And then maybe they will grow, maybe they will change, and that's good, or you could say it's good or bad, but you actually have to start by accepting who they are. Otherwise, it's just going to be an absolute train wreck, seriously, because you're just going to be beating your head against the wall of trying to like get someone to change when they don't even want to, and they're never going to change, and they're probably more likely to be stuck in their ways if you're like trying to pressure them, and nothing's ever going to work. So I think that's an important point as well.
Definitely, man. Yeah, I think change is hard for individuals in general, especially if they don't want to change for themselves. So yeah, it's very common, man. It's happened to me. I've seen it happen in other people, is that somehow we have this naive or unconscious belief like, of white knighting, that we can help someone out of their situation, and we almost feel compelled to, you know, pull them out of their misery. And that's why that quote from Neil Strauss is so valuable to keep in the forefront of our minds, that when you meet someone, you need to take them for who they are and basically expect no improvement, and anything is just icing on the cake. And it's true, man. Like, when I've looked back at certain relationships or dating partners, what I saw in the beginning and what I ignored came back to bite me at the end. And it's true, like, there might be a few red flags at the beginning, and, you know, as young, naive love, we might think, that's okay, or it's not a big deal. But as you move into higher paradigms of thinking, experience, and I guess gain a bit more wisdom, you really see that there are certain non-negotiables in relationships. And that's what I've done in my life manifesto. I think you've done something similar. I've got a few sections. One of them is called essential qualities. So I've really defined out with strong intention, what are the qualities that my future partner must have. And I've got one called deal breakers. So what are things that, are not good? For example, one of them is, not having close contact, or I guess not necessarily that, but, closing those open loops off from past relationships and mental things. And I expect that for myself as well. There's always room to go, and I'm still in this journey myself. So I totally think that it's so important for me to, embody all of these traits, because a lot of people, when you ask them, what do you want? They'll tell you surface level things, but they won't tell you what they actually need.
Must be taller than me in when I'm wearing heels.
That's right. They'll say, I want a girl, nice ass, and all these things. And that's fine. But especially with entrepreneurs, man, they'll say, they want all these things. They want someone who can, is sexy and, is attractive and whatnot. But that's often different to what they need. So I'm not saying it's the case for someone, but say someone hypothetically, what might be more important to them instead of a nice ass is someone who can, really support them on their mission and their vision, and, be that stable ground. Or maybe it's the other way. Maybe, the man holds a stable ground, and the woman's that corporate climber and the business owner, the empire builder, and he provides that safe ground for her to rise. But then The other thing is a lot of people, even if they know what they want, they forget to embody that themselves. And that's the real trap, man, is that they say, I want these characteristics from my partner, but they don't embody that themselves. And it's almost from a narcissistic view. It's thinking, an entitlement perspective. It's thinking, I'm so good that I need to demand this from people. But as you said, the market's always nearly efficient 99.9% of the time. And there are certain times when the market's not efficient, when people of different dating mate values, will be different. So maybe a 7 gets a 4, a 9 gets a 3. And that's only in the short term, because if that happens, what will happen is that the person with the higher DMV, as you call it, will just, it's a codependent. They'll break off. One will break off as the winner. One will break off as the loser. So more so than ever, man, I really believe it. You've got to embody what you want yourself with intention, and that all flows through to different things. But if you can get that solid inner state and do that inner work, and the thing is, it's not easy. I've been doing it myself for about 6 months seriously, and I still really think I've got quite a long way to go, because it's so deep and there's so many things to do to get yourself to that desired state, you could say, of non-reactivity, that true equanimous mindset that nothing really rocks you. If you have dinner plans with a friend and they cancel, at a very immature stage, you might get very angry and cut up, and you might affect your self-worth and that kind of stuff. But if you can come to that state where you're truly equanimous, shit could hit the fan, crazy crap could happen, and it doesn't really rock you. And I think that there's so many aspects to it, even things like worthiness. Do you feel worthy of these things? We've chatted in the past about actions where when someone doesn't feel worthy and they get given money, they just go and pour that money into gambling. They go and pour that money into prostitution. They pour it into things that are not good for them, because deep down at a core level in their identity, they don't feel they're worthy of the money. So so interesting, man. Like, if you look at, not you, but if people look at everything in the past that's manifested itself and how everything has turned out, and then drive it back to an inner state, it's almost always from our inner state. And those feelings, those thoughts, and those repetitive cycles that harbor inside us. And I guess another point is closure. Some people, when they finish a relationship, they say that they need their ex to give them closure, or they want to magically wake up and find it. And we've talked about it before. It's really just open loops internally, that like the tapes playing, that comes from a lot of things like projection. You're projecting who you thought they would be and you wanted them to be, but that's narcissistic, because they cannot be that. They can only be what they want to be and what they're capable of being. And you need to kind of manufacture this closure internally and close off these open loops. Otherwise, you can never do it. And it's immature to outsource that task and expect someone else to do it for you.
Yeah, dude. So a few things that stood out to me from what you were saying there, and this is something I forgot to mention before when you asked me what I learned from that whole experience that I had. And that was one of the biggest things that I learned, was you actually have to, as you said, manufacture your own closure, and especially in relationships, because here's the thing, if you're lucky and you have a good partner and whatnot, you can sort of end things amicably, and you can sort of have that closure from them, and that's great, and that's kind of what I've tried to do in the past. But sometimes you get people who, because of their own deficiencies, they just basically just drop off the face of the planet, or they're just not willing to help you. And it's not fair, but life isn't fair, and so that was one of the biggest things that I learned. It's I thought something was there that wasn't what I thought it was, and then I was forced to accept that and deal with it myself. I had to create that closure. The other person didn't create the closure for me, or didn't sort of hold that space for me, and that was hard for me to do, but it was an important lesson, because now I know that now that I know that I can actually do that, I don't need someone else to provide closure or to do anything, everything starts from within. And that was another test, another lesson for me to learn that I needed to actually be able to do that, so I was super grateful for that lesson too, which is good.
Yeah, definitely, man.
Yeah,
I think that sometimes in life, if you have one door open, you can't have multiple doors open. And sometimes in order for that door to open, you need to close one door. And that's something that I learned, is that there's so many aspects to a relationship, man. Like, again, we talked about those things before, values and whatnot, but sometimes it's a matter of timing. You can be the perfect person, they can be the perfect person for each other, everything lines up, but the timing's just off. And if you had met 6 months or a year later, things could have clicked, and you could have been perfect. And sometimes we have to realize that if that is the case, we can decide to potentially keep a relationship open. Sometimes it's better to close it off, and reopen it at a later time. And by keeping that door open, we really prevent ourselves from I guess we might tarnish it, or we might yeah.
Oh, dude, so powerful. Like, even specifically for me, I was like, I had this idea in my mind of, maybe this was just a timing thing, and it's kind of ended or closed, but maybe I'll keep the door like slightly ajar, and then maybe we can revisit this in like 6 or months or a year or something. But then I was thinking like, wow, it's like a really bad mindset to have, because your brain's a funny thing. Like, you can bullshit yourself really easily. Like, and I knew that I was saying like, I'll move on, but then maybe the door will be ajar. But reality is, like, if the door's like ajar, it's not closed, and then you're not gonna like heal and move on. And you also have this expectation of like, okay, so even though you said like, oh, I'll pick this up in a year potentially, your brain's like, in 1 year, like, you'll pick this up again. So imagine like you end something with someone, and then for that whole next year, whole 365 days, you're not like doing inner work on yourself, you're not healing, you're not moving on, because you have this expectation that, okay, I'll keep the door ajar and then like potentially try again. But then you find out that other person after that is like just completely like moved on and it's not interested in anything to do with you anymore. And you're basically then starting from zero. Then you just wasted a year of like emotional growth.
Well, you'd be going from negative because, you had this perception things would go back to normal.
Yeah.
You've pushed or deferred that inner work only to be, left high and dry, you could say. You shouldn't have an expectation for it, but,
Exactly. And so that's the thing, man. It's like that. And so sometimes like people are afraid to close the door because they're like, maybe that'll cut off anything from happening in the future. But ironically, by closing the door, that's actually what's going to keep it open in the future, potentially, because that's actually the only way that anything could ever happen again, is if you first close it.
That's right.
So it's a hard thing to do, but it's necessary.
Exactly. And it's a higher level mature decision that you need to make, because the alternative is the easy path. The easy path is, just to let things, fizzle out. And sometimes that's not good, because then, if you don't have proper communication, one person might get the wrong idea and might start misinterpreting things. And then it gets, it just gets murky. And what happens is then that can sometimes lead to people resenting each other, hating each other, when they should have just been upfront and honest about it. And it is a hard decision to, choose to do something like that, because when you're in love, a part of you really wants that person and you don't want to let it go. And sometimes it can be a lot of motivators inside, like fear, for example. You might think, wow, if I let this person go, they might find someone else and whatnot. And that can be, I guess, a motivator to keep them close. But we always have to remember that we need to do it for ourselves. We need to, close it off so we can close those loops internally, because there's no point keeping them open. If they're available, later on down the track, then you might be able to start something. If they're with someone else, they're with someone else. But what's more important for you is that you take care of yourself first, close off those internal loops, do that deep inner work, because you'll be able to attract a better partner down the line.
That's it, man. And that's something I've always noticed for myself. It's like every time you think that something's like perfect, or that you think that, this was like a once in a lifetime opportunity, it doesn't have to even be romantically, just anything. I've always found that, whenever something like that happens, so it's like extreme disappointment, someone turned out to be something different than what you thought, or maybe you didn't get some job or something, whatever, 6 months later or like a year later or something, there's always, for me, been something else that happened that was way better than that, and it wouldn't have happened if that first thing had worked out. So it's weird, man. Like, I actually believe this. I heard someone say once that life always makes sense when you look at it backwards. So, all these things happen to us where it doesn't really seem to make sense at the time. Like, we're like, fuck, why is this shit happening again? Like, it's just like another fucking hurdle to work through.
Yep.
But then whenever you look back, like in the future, at what that was, it always makes total sense. And I can see that now, even with stuff that's happened to me the past year. Like this example of this particular person, I learned like such a good lesson from this person. It's like, it's almost scary. It's like, I feel like there's some like spiritual guide
Yeah.
who like dumped this person into my life for the sole purpose of teaching me these really key lessons. So some of the stuff I went through before. And then once I learned them, or once they sort of did the damage, which should then force me to learn it, then they just like disappeared from my life. And it was almost like they were literally just like, not even a real person. It was just like someone who was dumped in and then fucked off by like some spiritual guide. And then just to teach me these lessons.
Wow.
And now I know for a fact that these lessons are going to be extremely valuable in the future, because one of the things I've learned now is like there's a certain personality type that I feel very attracted to that's actually extremely like bad for me, like I was saying before.
Yeah.
And so I actually know that now. Like I've had situations where I've like met someone and I've felt like intense attraction towards them, but then I can actually look at them more objectively now and be like, oh, this. Yeah, that's actually, I should not go anywhere near that person.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And so how good is that I now know that lesson, rather than like me, I don't know, like getting into like a long-term relationship, there's like a kid involved or something, and then what? Like life's fucked. So, you know, it's better to learn it in a low-risk way like it was. Even though it felt hard at the time, it's winning.
That's right, man. And I mean, the more I think about it and reflect, I mean, I might be wrong, and challenge me if you think this is the key. I think everything is a blessing. If you have a fantastic relationship and it's fulfilling and you're both growing as a union and whatnot, that's great. But if something, you know, you have a breakup or you realize there's not compatibility, that's a blessing, man. It's a hidden blessing, because we realize it helps us put us in a place where we either can see something within us that we need to fix, or maybe, you know, we chose the wrong person, or there was some kind of incompatibility. It's just, everything is a blessing. I see it that way, man, you know?
And yeah, absolutely, man. I think you're right. And it's like what we've talked about before, where everything is always in balance, you know? There's not one single thing that ever happens, and someone can let me know if they think of one, that something perceived bad or perceived good has happened, where there's not an equal opposite good or bad thing that's come for that. So, you know, you see, even for example, like coronavirus, for example, most people see that as bad, which it is. You know, it's like this virus, people are dying, people are getting sick, people can't travel, everything's shut down, all this stuff. So yeah, that's bad or perceived bad. But then there's also these good things that have come from, you know, like people have spent more time at home. They've reassessed, they've had stillness in their life for the first time in a long time. You know, people who travel consistently for work are like at home now and they're spending time with their family. There's been like less pollution and stuff, like the environment's like been better the past few months. So there's always like good and bad in any situation.
Yep.
And you're right, man. There's like, you can have a fantastic relationship, and it works for both ways as well, because you could have a fantastic relationship, which is great, but then there are downsides, you know, like you don't have the same flexibility and mobility that you once had. You know, maybe you're not growing as much because like you're in like a good relationship, so it's good, but it's not like this high growth stage that you're in before. So, you know, you can always find like good and bad in any situation. And when I look at experiences like this perceived bad, which was like extremely negative at the time, I can also see this extremely negative, extremely positive upside.
Yep.
And, you know, it's just, I do agree with you, man. I see it as a blessing.
100%, man. Again, you bring up coronavirus, and like what I said earlier, I don't believe there's not one... Okay, for example, let's say we look at retail businesses. They all might blame, you know, bad weather for their poor sales or something like that. Whenever you see that in your annual report, you can tell it's bullshit. It means that, you know, they had poor execution, or they had something that, you know, stopped them internally for the most part. And I see coronavirus in a similar way, man. It's that, you know, it happened, and all it did was it accelerated the structural forces, and it accelerated, you know, it was a catalyst for things that were already happening. So for businesses that hadn't got online and e-commerce, they struggled. For businesses that had poor systems and whatnot, they struggled, and people blame the competition or blame this and that. But the businesses that thrived is because they had all their stuff, they had e-commerce going, they had a good customer base, they had strong systems in place and all this. So I think it's so powerful.
Yeah, I love that, man. It's so true. And like, it's definitely not meant to sound like callous or anything, but it's like, it's true, dude. It's like, it's exposed, all it's done is exposed weaknesses in businesses that, were probably going to happen eventually anyway. It's just accelerated the rate that was going to happen. And I see them as like some businesses thrive. Like, in you and I, the world that we're sort of in, and a bit of it's like luck. Like it's not, there are some things that some sort of sectors or whatever where it's a lot harder than others, but luck is a combination of preparation and opportunity, so like there's a bit of luck involved, but the projects we've been working on have nothing but grown the past few months, like we're doing more and getting more success than we have in the past. And that's not like to brag or anything. It's just like, again, it's a bit of luck, but also a bit of preparation, and so it just shows like, what are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on the downside, or are you going to focus on the potential upside? And the choice is yours. You can just complain or like just let it get you or get you down, or just again see it as an opportunity to grow and learn and not make the same mistake in the future.
That's right, man. And I think everything happens for a reason. In business, this happened for a reason. If anything, and again, it's not meant to sound bad or anything, but I think it happened for a reason, especially to show the weak links and everything. So the weak links in systems, businesses that weren't doing so well. It's like a relationship, man. Back to that. I mean, it just shows you your weak links, and I think that people are brought into our life, and it's not always in a romantic capacity. It could be a boss, it could be a job, it could be an old friend getting in contact or whatever. People are brought into our life for a specific time, for a specific reason, to show us something specific. So,
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I totally agree. So let's talk about something specific and uncomfortable. So in terms of like dating, I want to talk a bit more about that because it's an interesting topic. So what are your thoughts at the moment around that? Like what do you want at the moment, and what are you working towards, or how are you kind of approaching that whole?
Yeah, well, going deep, man. I like it. Yeah, it's a good question. I recently had a good, I guess, check in with where I'm at. I've been doing the inner work for 6 months. I've made good progress with that. I still realize there is quite a bit more to do, and that, it's not, I don't look at it as something that, you need to do for a year and forget it. It's always, there's a lot of backlog, you could say, to do. And once you've caught up, it's a consistent thing. You need to make sure you're on track. So I realize that I've still got to do that. And that's why, I've taken the last 6 months, not focusing on women, mainly focusing on myself, my routines. I've started some new work online, doing lots of different things to I guess make myself the most attractive person long-term, investing in myself. And it's interesting, man. We've talked a lot in the past that there are times when, we crave, in the past, I've craved female interaction. I've craved, dating people. And it's so important to understand the intention behind that, because back then, last year, when I craved that, it was coming from a place of lack. I wanted someone to kind of fix my problems, or someone to come in and, keep me company or whatnot. But that's not actually going to be a positive thing. And I'm glad that, for the most part, I ignored it, and I was able to, to learn the lessons and do that deep inner work, And there was, a relationship towards the end of last year, which was, again, man, I have nothing but absolute gratitude. It was the most painful thing I've experienced in terms of love, but I look at it with immense gratitude, man. It taught me so much, and almost sometimes, we often speak about comfort. It's actually the worst thing in life, man, because when you're comfortable, you don't have any incentive, or you don't have any motivation to kind of, to go deep and do the work, and you can stay at a flat level. You plateau in your growth and whatnot. They say if you give a man, consistent, reliable sex, he just throws all his ambition out the window. So for me, it was so good, man. It got me to go deep, and it got me to to go within and do the deep work, give me that awareness, give me that incentive to go deep within. And that's something I'm still doing. I think I'm always looking for a long-term relationship at certain periods of time. So, my eyes are always open, but it's not something I'm actively pursuing right now because I still realize that, I have a minimum level of competency that I want to get to. Everyone has a different one. For example, someone's might be, I want to be at 10% body fat. I want to be able to make this much money, because the reality is, man, and no one thinks about it like this, is that I look at it as in lifestyle design, as we talked about. For me to welcome someone into my life and for me to give them a good experience, because that's what it is. I'm thinking, how can I give them a good experience and how can we have a good relationship together and grow? I need to have my shit sorted. I need to be, at a certain competency of health, a certain competency of money, a certain competency in, interests and progression and hobbies and those kind of things. And, I'm happy to admit, I'm not exactly where I want to be. I've made phenomenal progress in the past, 2 to 3 years of getting very close to where I want to be. But there are certain weak links or certain areas that I need to improve upon and fine tune. And yes, that's the trap. Once you've made a bit of progress, if you've, hit half your goal or even 80% of your goal, it's easy to just say, okay, I've made, substantial progress. I'm going to welcome someone in my life. And I think that is a real pitfall. It's a real trap to fall into, because you've almost hit it, but you haven't hit it. And you think, okay, if I have someone else, again, you're looking to them to be your messiah. You're saying, they can help me fix it, or they can get me to that point. But I think to be in the best state you can, and the most mature decision is to really hit all those minimum competency of all those goals and areas of life that you want to focus on. And once you've done that, you don't even have to worry about going out and, trying to find women, all this. They'll naturally come to you because you become more magnetically attractive. And that's something that I found as I've gotten better in terms of hitting all my goals. I was very skinny when I was quite young, and then I got into a bad relationship a few years ago, and it's crazy, man. Like, one of the things that that was, you could say, manifested from that, and again, something on the external manifested because something on the internal wasn't good. So I was unhappy inside, and it was not a great relationship, and that didn't give me a good platform for growth, and it didn't help me at all. So that meant that, I gained a lot of weight over the last few years. And then, when that relationship ended, I was able to it's crazy. I was able to go from about 28% body fat right down to about 14. So I halved it in about 9 months. So I was proud of it myself, man. And that was a good goal. And, I'm getting close to where I want to be at. Right now I'm looking at, say a 10 to 12% body fat. And I'm getting quite close to that. So again, it'd be easy to, to make justifications in the mind and say, okay, I've hit, I'm under 15, that's meant to be pretty healthy and whatnot, and make all these excuses. And you can do that. But for me, I want to be true to myself, man. And I want to have that true accomplishment that I know that, okay, I've hit all these goals, and as a result of that, I feel intrinsically very happy. And, you could say my internal state is fulfilled and it's healed. And because of that, I become more magnetically attractive on the exterior, and it just makes the whole process easier. It's like, you don't want to beat a dead horse. If you haven't hit those goals, or you're significantly off them, and then you want to go out and find someone, you have to put in so much more effort to overcompensate for things that inside you that are not lacking. And again, man, it's all intention. It all comes out in your subcommunication if things aren't well.
That's awesome, man. Congrats on hitting them.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. What about you? How would you feel? You've done some amazing progress and recovery over the last at least 9 months to a year. Mm-hmm. I think from my perception, man, you've recovered heaps and you've done so much inner work, and that's fantastic. And where do you see yourself, I guess, and what are you looking for currently?
Yeah, I love it. It's interesting, man, because so the past 12 months been in this period of, not wanting anything, just working on myself, doing all this deep inner work, which has been awesome. And I'm really glad that I did that, and it was necessary. But now what I realize is, for this time period now, it makes sense because here's the thing, I want to always maximize my growth, like whatever that is. I don't want to be stagnant. I don't want to be comfortable. And so in all areas, I want to always be growing as much as possible. And for me, the past 12 months, for me to grow the most, I've needed to have been by myself, So I've done that and I've grown a lot. But now I see moving forward, the way I can grow the most is to involve other people, you know? And so that's really what I'm just exploring at the moment. You know, I've had some really cool interactions with some really interesting people, and it's just so funny, man. It's like so cool, like just to meet interesting people, and especially if they're like different like cultures, different like stages of life, different paths that they're on. And here's the thing, it does, you're absolutely right. It comes down to that intention, because like when I think about like dating or like meeting people, I have no expectations. I have no intentions in terms of like what I want out of it. You know, like some people will go around and they'll say like, I want to sleep with as many women as possible, or I want to like get into a relationship, or whatever the case is. But all I'm doing is I'm saying I want to meet some interesting people and have some interesting conversations and do some fun things. And, you know, there's no agenda, you know. And it's like, it's different because it is important to be intentional, and like I feel like you do need to have like your kind of purpose and everything. You want to have some sort of purpose of the interaction, but it's not out of a place of, you know, I'm trying to get X from the person, and if I don't get X, then it's a failure. That's the thing. My definition of success in this whole situation is I just want to have interactions with people, and however they end up, I'm totally equanimous with. And that's really good for my spiritual growth at the moment. And yeah, I'm just enjoying it and seeing what happens.
Yeah, it's good, man. Do you think that's something that a lot of people get wrong potentially with relationships? You know, they might go out looking for something specific, and you know, they're trying to obviously put a square peg through a round hole, you know, and like they're trying to look for something like, I need this right now. And again, that's coming from a place of need, which is, again, really bad, you know, and I guess I believe it, that sometimes the best relationships manifest unexpectedly. You weren't looking for stuff, and, you know, they came along, you were in a right state to accept them, and they were in the right state to receive it, and likewise, vice versa.
Yeah, it's a lot of people do get it wrong, man. And I think that, you know, I'm a very like upfront person, and you know, I'll say what's on my mind, and it's true in like all these interactions, you know, like because a lot of people like too much fucking around, man. People like try to like use all these techniques, or like they're like, don't say this or do say that or whatever, and it's just like it's all bullshit, man. And you know, like if I feel something or I think something, I'm just gonna say it, and if that like kills the interaction or whatever, I don't really care. But the ironic thing is it won't, you know? So I'll give you an example. Like if I met someone the other day and I thought they were like extremely beautiful, and, you know, a lot of guys would be like, oh, like hide your kind of like desire. Like don't tell them that they're beautiful or whatever, like make them work for you or whatever. But that's not what I'm going to do. Like if I think someone's beautiful, I'm going to tell them that I think they're beautiful, you know? And it's not from a place of me like wanting anything, because some guys will say like, oh, you're very beautiful, and then what they're actually saying is like, I'm going to compliment you, but I want you to then give me X. Or
Giving with the expectation.
Giving with expectation, exactly. But it's just when you actually like give a compliment, or, you know, just say what's on your mind, and you don't need anything in return, that's actually really powerful. And people actually appreciate that, because people aren't fucking stupid, man. Like they know when people are just talking shit just to like try and get an outcome.
Yes, an ego boost or whatever.
Exactly. So, you know, when you can actually be genuine and just enjoy your time with someone, and you know, it's powerful. So yeah,
dude, it's phenomenal.
So big growth experiences.
Yeah, dude, there's so many takeaways that I guess we've both had from the whole thing. I mean, what do you see is coming up for you in terms of like inner work? Because you've done a lot of the hard stuff. What do you think is still left to do for yourself? And if you do see yourself hitting that, you know, I guess that maintenance stage, what does that encompass?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. Yeah, it's funny. Like, and this is like a conditioning that I still need to work on, is that I kind of have always had the mentality that life should be hard, you know? I think a lot of people have that mentality where it's like, it should be hard to make money. It should be hard to like have a good relationship. It should be hard to do whatever you're doing. And I think that's can be true. Like a lot of things are hard, but the problem I've had in the past was like, I think things should be hard, so I always end up making them hard, you know?
Yeah.
And I've kind of gone to this point, especially like this week, man. Like, you know, I remember we were on a hike the other day and I was just commenting that like, wow, this is like so cool. We've, you know, this, like things are good. Like we're making money, we're having some impact, obviously can grow it. We can grow all these things, but like the foundation is there. It's like all the needs are taken care of. We've got fulfilling like friendships, having fun, like enjoying the fucking sunshine and walks and
Life
nature. Life is good, man.
Yeah.
And it's like, why should life be hard? I don't expect it to, it's never always going to be easy. There's going to be like challenges and, you know, there's going to be times where it gets a lot harder than it is right now. But it's like, why do I need to make it like that? Sure, there's going to be circumstances outside of my control that come along and maybe that'll be a challenge. But, you know, when times are good, like don't get complacent because then times will get hard eventually and then you'll be underprepared. But just, you don't have to like stress all the time. Just keep executing on the daily and, you know, make that small progress every day. And that's actually what's going to work in the long term. And so for like my inner work and working on myself, you know, that's how I feel, man. It's just don't get sloppy, you know, like I've done like this hard work of like I did for past, I've done a lot of inner work, had tough conversations with people, you know, had hard experiences and worked through them and faced a lot of things. So don't like waste that foundation, you know, you like the hardest work is done internally. So now it's just don't fuck that up, you know, and keep working on it. Like never get complacent, but just keep it going, you know?
Yeah. I believe it, man. It's equally as important to mitigate the loss and the decay, you know, the natural dissolution of everything. So, yeah, dude. What would you recommend for, I guess, for someone who, you know, wants to become more in tune with their internal state and they want to start the inner work? You know, they're aware they might have some negative charges in the past, resentment, they might have some unresolved baggage and they just don't know where to start. I mean, what did you do and what would you recommend people do practically?
Yeah, I love it, man. It's a good question. I think for me, you got to create space, you know, for yourself. And that could look like a lot of different things for a lot of different people. For me, that was doing like Vipassana, for example, like 10-day meditation course that created a lot of space and allowed me to go pretty deep. And even just stuff like, you know, taking a day a week to yourself away from like technology, just create some sort of space, you know, because space, removing distraction, removing stimulation is what will actually reveal things that you need to work through. Because it's like I was saying to you before, Ryan, like we had a conversation earlier about how, you know, sometimes you might have a sore foot, but the issue is not actually in your foot, it's like in your knee, you know, but it's just manifesting in your foot. And so a lot of the time that happens with like emotional things as well. It's like we think that we have this pain to do with something, but actually it's something completely different that we didn't even think about. And the only way we can actually discover where that came from is, I mean, there's a few ways really, like therapy maybe. I've never done those, I can't really comment on it, but you know, just for me, it was like creating that space and being able to become aware of it is the first step. And just being, I think as well, just being willing to be honest. And this is advice that I thought of as advice I'll give to my younger self, is that people always say like, trust your gut and trust your instinct. And, you know, we've talked about it before, sometimes for emotional things, it's not the best idea or you need to question it. But I think most of the time our gut is pretty accurate in terms of like, if we're doing something that isn't serving us, normally we'll know deep down, or once that happens, once that passes in like a year's time, whatever, we look back and we're like, oh yeah, I knew that all along deep down. Yep. So actually like having the guts to listen to your gut, you know, and actually execute on that is something this powerful. Yeah, so I think that's a good start. Just get the awareness and then be willing to make the changes, and not being afraid of being alone, you know, and removing, when I say alone, it could be away from people, but also like, because for me personally, and this might not work for everyone, but every time I've created the space, every time I've felt like I'm on the wrong track, I don't know the answers or exactly what I need to do instead, but I know that I need to get rid of whatever is filling that space currently. So I've had in the past, like I've been in relationships or I've been in a job that was really unfulfilling. And I knew that it wasn't what I should be doing, but I didn't have a clear alternative. Like I didn't know if I quit this job, what will I do?
Yes.
If I end this relationship, who will I be with? I didn't have those answers at the time, but I just knew that, and I had kind of the confidence that if I just get rid of them and create that space, the actual answers will become really clear. It's actually really obvious. And that's happened to me, you know. Opportunities have come about when I've created that space that I couldn't have imagined. And it's not to say that everyone should just like quit their job or whatever if they're feeling unfulfilled, but for me personally, just when I create space, the answers usually become clear.
Yeah, dude, I so agree with that. I think a few little thoughts that I had on it is the first thing is vulnerability. It's interesting, man. I think that, and we both talk about it a lot, is that I think we're both quite developed as males, obviously intellectually, but also emotionally. And sometimes that can be a hard thing for guys to be in touch with their emotion. I think we're very in touch with our emotion, and we can swing from the scale. We can go from highly analytical combos to highly emotional combos and everything in between. And I think that's such a great skill to have. And I think that vulnerability, you know, in itself is so important, man, because we have to be willing to, yeah, as you said, be alone and feel that, you know, feel what's in us, you know, and sometimes it can, and I can't say I can resonate because I'm quite comfortable with all the emotions inside me, but that first step, you know, awareness, then vulnerability of that inner state, you know, being willing to, you know, even talk to yourself, journal. I mean, maybe talk to a therapist or talk to a close friend or someone who can, you know, hold space and listen to you. I think that's important. And then also listening, you know, and it's crazy, man. Like, it's hard to find people who are good listeners, honestly. And again, like we always say, if you want to find a good listener, be a good listener yourself. So that's what I strive to do. Always trying to improve that is, you know, holding space, listening, have a genuine care and concern for that person, and actually being 100% present in that state. Because yeah, it's crazy. I mean, a lot of people, when you talk to them, you know, they're kind of half listening, but they just want to get their point across the line, or they don't really care. They want you to fix them, and then like they'll just zone out or go on their phone or something like that, and they're not truly good listeners. So I think that those two are quite important: vulnerability and listening, active listening.
Yeah, so true, man. It's crazy. It's like I know you have as well, and for myself, like I consider that like a strength, being a good listener of mine. Like that's a strength of mine, and you know, it's crazy. Like people have commented like on me just because I just think it's normal, man. Like I just want to like listen to what people are saying, and if I don't think they're interesting, then I just don't talk to them, you know.
Yep.
And so but when I talk to someone who I think is interesting, people always like comment on that they felt like very like that I had like a calm presence, and they felt like they could like share things with me, and that they felt like I understood it. And that's such a powerful thing to do, because you're right, not many people would do it well. I wonder why that is. Just because people are selfish.
Maybe. I think maybe the internal state, you could say, is quite noisy. It's quite clouded. They've got a lot of things going on, anxiety, all this stuff, and they don't have the intention, man. Like, you know, whenever I come into conversations, you know, I try to, you know, hold that space and, you know, be truly deliberate. No matter what's going on, you could have like a lot of stuff going on in the background, a lot of things that need your attention or things that might make you anxious or whatnot. But it's a certain power, man, that a quantumous power to really step in and lean into that discomfort and also put it aside and say, okay, it is what it is. Let's, you know, hold this space, and I'm going to talk to this person, and I'm going to be fully present with them, because there's nothing worse, man, than talking to someone who's zoning in, zoning out. They're not present with the interaction, and it's always better to have, you know, 30 minutes of quality conversation than having 2 hours of, you know, being in and out, and it just doesn't feel fulfilling.
Yeah, that's right, man. Yeah, so what else is on your mind?
We've chatted about a lot, man. That's cool. I guess just tightening everything up, man. Like we've passed 6 months now. We're nearly into, I guess, the second half of the year. Some people look at it like Corona took my year. I think it's an absolute blessing, and again, I don't underestimate. It's been tough for some people. For myself, it's been nothing but a blessing, and things are going better than ever. So I'm really happy for that. I think the latter half of the year is about fine-tuning systems, fine-tuning stuff, again going deep on the inner work, and just just tidying things up, and just not underestimating the importance of the basics, getting good routines and keeping to them, and all that. So
Yeah, I think if you can keep your routines tight, that's 50% of the battle,
that's right, man.
Yeah.
That's right.
I guess, I think we've covered a lot here. Is there any other topics that you think we should have a chat about?
Let me have a think, man. Well, yeah, it's been quite a bit.
If you want to grab the...
Yeah, man. I think something that comes to mind for me is the topic of friendships, man. It's so interesting. Like, there's so much to talk about with it. The thing is, man, I don't know, a lot of people, they have, like, I'd say, not optimal friendships. I mean, I was in the same basket, so I'm not saying it's a bad thing or whatnot, but I was in that basket, when I left school. I had, these supposed friends and whatnot, and I made more friends, and it really, have to question what is the actual definition of a friendship and what are the true characteristics, and I didn't have a waypoint. I was in the minefield, just exploring things, and I didn't really, I guess, know much about what to expect, and also my standards and what I wanted for myself. And then, again, I really believe it. If you're going about with no intention and no proper, you could say purpose, it's very likely that things will, crash and burn, and, you won't ever hit that fulfilling or fulfilled state. So, that's something that, I've tightened up a lot. I guess expecting more from myself in that regard, tightening my friendships, but also, again, like I say, you got to be a good friend yourself. So, I define a friend as someone, who, I mean, it's hard to define, but I think some of the characteristics that, you can have deep, meaningful combos, you support each other on their mission, on each other's missions, you're there for each other when you need help, and you can genuinely give and, receive the true gifts of friendship.
Yeah, it's important, man. Because, we talked a bit about romantic relationships, which is hard to get right, but I don't know, like, I'd even maybe consider that friendships are even harder.
Yeah, wow.
Because, like, they're so important, and because your friends really, like, they form part of, like, the stable base of your life, It's like romantic relationships can come and go, and, ideally you end up with one person, and that's, like, great, but especially, like, in the beginning, like, your friends are... There should be no reason why you lose a friend, If they're a genuine friend and you let them into your inner circle, they should be there for life. There's absolutely no reason why they should ever leave that, unless they actually change as a person. Because that's the thing with romantic relationships, like, both your circumstances can change. You could both be good people, but just not good for each other anymore. But a friendship is actually more like a lifetime thing, I feel like.
Yeah.
And so it's almost harder to, like, filter someone in who's good for that.
Yeah.
Because it's, like, more of a responsibility,
Yeah. It's true, man. I mean, we have the concept, you could say, inner circle, and that's what I did. So again, when I said, I had some suboptimal friendships, I didn't really know what to expect. And then, I think beginning of 2019, so beginning of last year, I just did a complete reset, man. I guess it's true, man. Like, we become the product of people we hang around. They say you are, the people, you are the person of the 5 people around you, and you're going to achieve similar characteristics in every area of life to those people. So I did a complete reset, man. I was feeling somewhat unfulfilled, and I knew that there was more out there. And, that's why I sat down and I actually thought, okay, what is true friendship to me? And then I, started to go out and scout and find those people. It's like building your cabinet of advisors. And, some people think it's painful because you have to get rid of some people. It doesn't have to get rid of people. I think there's layers to it. You can have inner circle is that your close community, and the people who are close, and who you feel the most fulfilled by, and who motivate you and drive you and push you to new heights. but then you can have other layers, and it's so important not to see it in a black and white fashion. You don't want to see it like they're either in the inner circle or they're out and then they're not, because there's different layers. There are people, who you might talk to once a month, people you talk to once a week or once a year, different layers to the game. So I did a complete reset of that myself, and I'm so grateful, man. I think that you're right. Friendships, you welcome them in for life, unless there's some major changes. And it's so important to have that down pat, man, because I've seen other people with their friendships, and I've asked them, I can see that they're not really fulfilled by them, and I ask them, is this person really your friend? You spend a lot of time and you call them your friend, but how true of a friendship is it? And some people say, well, I don't really like them, but I need to keep them because they might be useful to me in the future. And then I question, okay, well, that might be your version of friendship, and everyone has a different one, so I try not to judge people, but even looking from a common sense perspective, that doesn't seem like a good idea to keep someone in your life, and call them a friend. And I don't know, I had a good insight, like when I went through that reset, man. It's that I see a lot of people have you could say a lot of friendships, and again, their definition will differ, but I can see some are close and some are not so close. And I think that, in terms of an efficiency perspective, they should just cut half of them and double down on the friendships that are good, to spend more time on the ones that are good for them. And it's all right if you do a reset of your social circle and you see that, okay, I've only got 5 people who are truly down for me and they actually care about me and they have my best intentions at heart. And likewise, you have the same for them. You're giving and have their best intentions at heart. And that's fine. If you realize I have 5, that's fantastic. It's always better to have 5 high quality friends, or even 3, but they're really high quality and, you're down for them, they're down for you and whatnot, rather than having, 20 so-called friendships or 2,000 Facebook friends, but it doesn't make a difference. And I mean, maybe that's something we can get into later, I guess, happiness versus fulfillment. Anyone can make you happy in the moment. You're chatting to someone new, you can feel happy. But the question is, do you feel fulfilled? And I think that comes from many things. Like, some people have friendships that are 20 years old, man, and that's just insane. Like, they say, new people are good, but old people are gold. And it's good to keep those old people, in your social circle. It doesn't always have to be that way, but yeah, dude, I just think it's interesting. And it's so important because I consider the social circle to be, along with your family, they're going to be some of the closest people to you in life. And again, you embody those traits of those people around you. So it just makes sense from a logical perspective to want to have the best friends. And for you also never to forget to be a good friend to them.
That's so powerful, man. I love it. I think, so with like, I guess your friendships now, or I guess maybe for someone listening, like, let's say they've got a group of 5 or 10 people who they consider like close friends, and, because here's the thing, it's the same with what we were talking about before with like job searches, with romantic relationships. A lot of time we just fall into like friendships, but, how can you start like curating a circle, I guess, is the question. Like, what's the first step and how can you sort of go about that?
It's a great question, man. I haven't put any prep into it. I think I'm just running off one of my thoughts here. I think values are important. Understanding your values, like what do you appreciate, If you appreciate honesty and you've got a friend who's, not showing those actions, then it's not really congruent with you and it's going to seep into you and it's going to have this negative impact. So I think clarifying, the values, and you don't always have to ask someone. Like, a lot of people think, I need to go, ask romantic partners or friends, what are your values? And we need to make sure ours line up. I don't think it's like that at all. Like, it can be, but you can also just observe people, read people. Like we said, fine tune your bullshit detectors and just watch their actions. Do they match up with their words? Are they sincere? These kind of things. I don't know. I think also, are you moving in the same direction and can you support each other? So it's like a mutually beneficial interaction. Like, you can help each other. And people say help. It doesn't always just mean doing things for the other person, but it can mean, the ability to go into deep conversations and really challenge that person, challenge their thoughts, beliefs, and feelings, those things. And it could also be helping them on their projects. So I think there's no real formula for it. I think that you've also got to go off your feeling and a bit of the vibe. Do you get on? Is like, is there some kind of, you could say chemistry even for the friendship? You could, again, someone could tick all the boxes on paper, and you meet and the interactions are dry. And again, each person will be different. It depends. Some people are more extroverted and they want to talk a lot. They want to do a lot of fun experiential activities. Some people are more introverted and whatnot. And it's good to have a mix of friends and a mix of people in your social circle. So I guess that's what I'd go off.
Yeah, it's good. Good, man. It's good advice. And I think another key thing as well is that when you're looking at, because someone who's not really familiar to this concept might look at the idea of like cutting friends or like curating a circle and be like, oh, it's like terrible. It's like an asshole thing to do, like cut out these people or whatever. But the reality is, like, it's not like that's the good thing about friendships, I guess, over romantic relationships, is that you don't actually have to like cut people out. Like, you don't have to break up with your friends, but if you have a friend and maybe they're a good person and like you get along well, but maybe they're like going out getting drunk every night or going to the strippers or whatever, and so you just don't want to do that because it's like not in line with what you want to do right now.
Yep.
That doesn't mean you have to tell them to get fucked. It's just like, just maybe don't hang out with them every night, And so maybe if they're asking you to hang out every night, then maybe just don't start like cutting that down, the amount of time you spend with them. And it's not, people might think that sounds mean or whatever, but it's actually not, because that's the whole point of a friendship. It needs to be serving both parties, like you said. And sure, by you hanging out with them, it's serving them because they enjoy your company, but you're not actually serving yourself.
Yes.
So both parties need to be getting served.
Yep.
And so that's what really needs to happen. And that sometimes requires limiting the amount of time you spend with certain people so that you can create space for other people who are more aligned. Again, no one's like right or wrong. No one's good or bad. It's just, what do you want? And is your inner circle kind of reflective of that,
Yeah, dude, it's so true. It's a good topic as well. Again, some people might interpret it as, that's mean or this and that. You have to use your discernment to really understand it. It's no formula. No one can tell you. If you have a really good friend you've known for a while, you've known for a long time to say, and they hit a rough patch, you have to have the discernment to know, well, maybe I should, because sometimes when people are, they're not communicating or they're angry or annoyed, the truth is sometimes they actually need you more than ever. And sometimes we have to have that discernment to say, okay, well, this person might be bad, as you said, might be going to the strippers every night or going drinking and all this. And we have to understand, can we try and help them? Because I think our responsibility, you could say, if it's, a deeper friendship, is the responsibility of a duty of care to them, to try and help them. And you don't want to get too involved, because the reality is you can't actually fix someone else's problems, especially if they don't want to change their own situation. But you can at least, try and help them. And the other concept I think about is people say, oh, that's selfish and whatnot. I always think of it like the airplane, when the mask come down. You need to put your mask on before you can, help other people. And the same thing happens, if you have a friendship that is not serving you, or even a relationship or something like that, you might feel bad internally, like you don't want to cut it off, or it's discomfort, or there's something else, there's other people involved who they might get annoyed or affected or whatnot. And I can't speak for all situations, but you need to take care of yourself first. I truly believe that, because if you can't take care of yourself and get your needs met, how can you give your best gifts to the world? It's impossible. So important to do what is necessary for yourself, and that's including fostering a really strong, good social circle.
I love that, man. And speaking of friends, because this is something I'm curious about and something I've only recently thought about because I hadn't really experienced it before, but we're talking about other people's intentions, and sometimes they don't always have your best intentions at heart. And one thing I've noticed for myself is that in the past, I still think I've done nothing, but like in the past, I'd really done like dick shit. And so when I like looked at people who wanted to interact with me and people who liked me and like gave me their friendship, the only people who did that were people who actually who liked me as a person for who I am.
Yep.
Because that was the only reason to do that. But now, like, again, I don't think I've done anything, and like I still have so far to go on my own journey, but like there's some sort of like, I've gotten some results, like I've got the podcast, which is great. Like I've met some really interesting people, and I think it's like, it's not so much I think there's some like perception of me to some people that I'm like at this level, which I don't think I'm at, but I guess maybe just the fact that I have like the podcast and, you know, some of the business stuff I've done or whatever, or the way I carry myself, like people think I'm kind of at this high level. And what I've actually noticed is that it is actually like can attract more exploitative people. And like, you know, and like the extreme example is like the rich guy who gets like the gold diggers coming from him or whatever.
The lawsuits.
Yeah. Or the lawsuits. It's like, yeah, the people employees like tripping over banana peels and trying to sue for the grape or whatever. And so, you know, it's like, I feel like as you progress in life and as you do more and as you achieve more, that is great and it brings a lot of happiness and fulfillment, but it also can bring problems, and especially when it comes to like friendships and also romantic relationships, because, and this is something we've talked about before, like it's actually the worst thing that I can ever imagine, like say with a friendship or a romantic relationship, is to have someone in my life who I think is like a true friend or a true partner and loves me for who I am and like has always been there. And then, you know, to have a situation where maybe I lose all my money or like lose all my status, whatever that looks like. And then that's when you kind of need that person the most. But then you find out this whole time they were just, the whole reason that they liked you is because of that sort of perceived status rather than you actually as a person.
Yes.
And then so you've got this double like negative of like you get fucked in like business or whatever, but then you also, your friends or your romantic partner just kicks you to the curb and like stomps your head into the gutter.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So,
wow.
So I think it's like, it's really important to try and filter out people like that. And it's a genuine issue, man. Like not everyone thinks about that because not everyone has like big plans, but the way I see it, if that's happened to me to some degree now when I've done fuck all, like I can imagine that as I actually do more, it's going to be like way, way worse. So yeah, if you ever put any thought into that, like how can people kind of make sure they filter out some of these more exploitative people?
Yeah, dude, I love the question. I mean, one of my deep passions, you know, has been psychology, reading people. It's so important, man. It's so important. I mean, depending on what stats you read, a lot of different scientists and psychologists and whatnot have said they think between 30 to 70% of people have serious psychological issues. They define it, if you look at the dark triad theory, so dark triad and there's tetrad and there's, you know, all the other ones, but dark triad is a measure of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. And if you think of it in that framework, it breaks down, you know, these traits into something that you can actually visualize and you can see and recognize in people. The thing with narcissism, I find, people just think it's looking in the mirror, and the reality is that is a part of it. There's actually 7 subfacets in the narcissism personality inventory, and one of them is actually exploitativeness, as you could say. And it's so interesting, man, because I do believe that, and it's such a good point you raise. I mean, for people like us, we're early on in our journey. We haven't done dick shit for the most part, and we're yet to achieve so much more. And, you know, we've seen a little bit, you know, of haters coming out of the woodwork and exploitative people, you know, trying to pull us down and whatnot. And it's such a good lesson and a good reminder, because as we rise up, we can only expect this to go higher and higher, more people to come out of the woodwork and try and attack us down. And, you know, we don't want to attract these people, but it's just the reality. Like, no matter who you look at, people like Michael Jordan, he said before, you know, similar stuff. And, you know, anyone who's kind of done well, they've attracted these kind of people. And it's not because of who they are, but people, I think, observe others, and if they're doing well, the people who come out of the woodwork and they hate, they're unfulfilled in their own mission, because if they were truly successful in what they were doing, they wouldn't have the energy and the time to kind of pull people down. And they found people, as a study by psychology today, they found that people who actually write these mean comments on YouTube and whatnot, they have serious mental issues and serious psychological issues. So I think it's important, man. I think understanding psychology and reading people is paramount. And yes, you can only get so much of that from reading books. For me, it's really important to get out there, man, to fine-tune that bullshit detectors, you know, go meet people. And sometimes you have to get fucked around to know what's happening. Like, I've been screwed around in business and exploited for my value, for my worth. And over time, as you have these experiences, and honestly, I couldn't be more grateful for them, man, because they've helped me calibrate, you know, my skills of reading people and understanding what to look out for. But Yeah, I think it's just recognizing these traits in people. You can educate yourself on a bit of psychology, like the dark triad, a bit of Hexico, that kind of stuff. And man, romantic relationships, again, we talk about that, man. Like, it's crazy. I mean, yeah, that could be one of the worst things, like you said, to find someone who you thought truly cared about you, who ended up, they didn't really care about you. And again, romantic relationships, again, sometimes they can be the most fulfilling, but sometimes what can be the most fulfilling can also burn you the most. And sometimes I think it's just a matter of trial and error. Like, you can't expect to, study the field or the plane and not get hurt at all, because we develop so much through adversities. So I think it's having the general level of awareness around these kind of people. Some people advise to do testing. You can test people's dark triad and whatnot. I've done that in the past for certain individuals. It can be quite helpful in the beginning, because you can kind of put a number to a perception of who they are and kind of fine tune it. But the reality is, you never want to use it as a crutch. You never want to rest on a test, and get people to do this or whatnot. It can be helpful in many circumstances, but sometimes you just have to experience it. And I guess also not being too naive, man, especially when I was a lot younger, like around 18, 19, going into the world, leaving home at such a young age and being independent, doing my own thing. I was very naive, and you have to be burnt a few times. And the thing is, you don't want to develop this cynical mindset. And I don't think I've developed that at all, but you want to look at each experience holistically, look at it for what it was, and take the individual merit from it and say, what can I learn from this? Where did I get exploited? Where was my weak points? And how can I ensure this doesn't happen again? And if you can keep going through that over time, hopefully you'll experience less of these exploitative people. It's interesting, man. You and me, we post a fair bit on social media. We like to share the journey, document the journey. And part of the journey sometimes is showing the success, A lot of the times I think we're showing the trench work, sometimes the failures and things that aren't going so well. But it's natural if you're going to share that, to sometimes share success. And I really believe we don't share it from a place of bragging. It's not just show off, but it's to show some of the fruits of our labor and to inspire other people to do stuff. And naturally, you're going to attract, these people who don't have your best interests at heart. For example, I'm well aware, man, when I post stuff on Instagram, I can see people who watch my story who don't follow me, and I know who hate me, like people who have, been bullies in the past or whatnot and tried to pull me down, and I can see them lurking, man. They're orbiting there. I think that's just a natural fact of life, and we shouldn't let it pull us down. We really shouldn't let it get to us, and for the most part, it doesn't. But I think it's normal to also harbor that space in yourself and understand that, look, these people are here. They're always going to be there, and even if you manage to, block them or delete them or whatnot, people from the woodwork out, man, they will come out and they will come and get you. And I think, just having that true understanding that they're there, not being too naive, but also just understanding they're fucked up, man. These people who want to go out there and pull you down and exploit you for your value and your worth, they're messed up, man. They're not good people, and they're not doing anything. And that's something I've learned as I've been exploited in the past. I didn't actually believe it for a while, man, but, the truth always wins out in the end. The people who lie, the stealers, all those people, it seems like weird, man. Like, in the moment, we can't believe it, and we're thinking, how did they rip me off? And this is injustice. They're getting away and whatnot. But when we take that higher level thinking and perspective, that the truth always wins out, and that we don't have to worry. Karma, I believe, is real. Not always in the way most people think, like more of a spiritual karma. And that, we just should mitigate the downside. Again, you can focus on, trying to stop all this or whatnot. But if you can just, again, going back to inner work, man, see, it's all correlated. If we can have a strong identity, a strong worth, self-worth, self-esteem, these kind of things, yes, it can get you. But at the same time, you try to move forward as productively as possible, and you have a good support network around you.
Wow, man, it's powerful. And I think you have done an amazing job of remaining, because it'll be like, there's things that obviously we've spoken about off camera and stuff of getting burned, and I think a few of the experiences you've been through, it would be easy for you to become quite cynical about a lot of different things, and you haven't done that, which I think is really amazing, because like I was saying before, man, we have quite a lot of grit, and we're quite resilient as people, which I think is evidenced in some of these things where we get burnt a few times, but we're able to keep going. And I just think about like the average person and the experiences they go through, and I'm like, man, this was so hard for me, and I feel like I actually have quite a lot of grit. So how's this like old mate down the road with like no grit?
Yeah.
How's he ever going to get anywhere close to what he wants? Because I've had to go through, like, my life's been very easy overall, like, compared to most people, but, you know, there's been challenging things, as we all have. And, you know, I'm like, man, that took like a lot of like grit to recover from that and to not become like cynical and closed off. And so I just wonder sometimes how other people would do that, you know? But I think, yeah, you've done a great job of remaining. You learn. That's the thing, and this is the important thing. It's you want to learn from the mistake, and you want to take that lesson forward, but you don't want to take the wound and the cynicism, forward. You just want to take the good from it, which is the lesson, and just fuck off the rest.
Yeah.
And don't let that cloud you in the future, because that's what happens to most people, man. Like business relationships, they get burnt once or twice, and it creates this scar, and it affects all their future decisions. Whereas in reality, yeah, it should affect your decisions in terms of like you've learned a lesson, but it should not be from a place of like, you shouldn't just like paint everyone with that same brush moving forward. Just learn and then move forward, you know?
100%, man. There's a good quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. He talks about you learn about yourself through friends and enemies, and I believe it, man. I love the enemies bit because I don't think I have that many, or I'm not consciously aware of any. People might hate me, who knows? But I used to be a salesperson for Vodafone, and we went on a company trip. So I was the top salesperson in 2017, and they take the top 20 people from each state over to a country, and they pay for your weekly holiday. And I couldn't forget, man, I was at the bar, getting a drink. And, one of the guys who I could say he was my enemy, he didn't like me. He came up to me and he was quite drunk, and he said, I just wanted to tell you, we all fucking hate you, but you're really good at sales. And I think that is so important, man, because a lot of people, they're not going to give you insight into who you are. So that's why I think friends is important, man, especially friendships that are very strong, like inner circle friendships. They can be blunt with you. And that's why, again, back to that topic as a mini point, it's so important, man, to be blunt with your friends. If they fucked up, tell them straight to their face and not try to hide things and, again, do things that are in the best interest of their spiritual growth. And that's why I feel, yes, we learn through ourselves through friends, but enemies as well, because the people who hate us and come out of the woodwork, that it's oftentimes they'll leave clues of why they hate us, and we can use that to better ourselves.
Amazing, man. Yeah, it's powerful, dude, and it's important to do that. So I love that, man. Have you got any more thoughts on that topic? I've actually got another thought.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's funny, man. Like talking about exploitative people. This is why I have sympathy for a lot of these like high profile people who, like we've talked about this before. It was like when there's all like the bushfires and stuff here in Australia, and like, people were making donations for that, and then there's people like Jeff Bezos or people like him making like fairly large donations, like, $1 million or whatever, but, compared to their net worth, it's not very much. And, like all these people just come out of the woodwork and they're like, fuck Jeff Bezos. He's like worth however many billions of dollars and he's giving $1 million. That's like an average person giving like 1 cent or something. Just like all this bullshit. I was like, yeah, like true, but reality is it's $1 million. How much did you fucking give? And then I think about, like, because I've never had this experience of, well, I had an experience recently of like someone coming out of the woodwork and like asking me for money, and it's something I've never experienced before because, again, like I feel like I've done like nothing, but I had this person reach out to me and like they must have this like perception of me that I'm like this wealthy guy or whatever, and they basically just asked me for money, and it was weird because my initial reaction was like, I was thinking like, how do I respond to this? And initially my reaction was, I don't really want to give them money because I have no idea who this person is, kind of thing. But then, I thought about it and I was like, well, again, it's kind of like an experiment in a way. It's like, well, first of all, it sounds like they're genuine. Like it could be a scam, but they do sound quite genuine. They sound like they need it. And reality is the amount they were asking for was not like crazy. Like it was something that I could easily afford. And I was like, well, like, as you said, karma, I believe is like a real thing as well. So why not? We'll just help them out. Like I have the capacity. So I did. And I sent them the money. And then, this And the person basically accepted the money, and then, you know, they then came back to me, and it's just funny, man. It's like that old saying, like, teach a man to give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. It came to mind, man, because like this person, they couldn't even like figure out how to accept the money. Like I sent them money via PayPal, and they literally were like treating me like tech support. They're like, oh, I can't access the money. Like, tell me what I need to do to get. I'm like, fuck, man. Like, first of all, you asked me for money, and I send you the fucking money, and now you're like wanting me to be like PayPal tech support. It's like, fuck. And then the person was like, oh, I really need it. Like, I can't like open it because there was some like reason. And then, you know, they were like asking me to send it. So I was like, okay, send me back that money and I'll send you this. And again, it was a small amount. So like, I didn't really care. So I helped them out. But it's just like, no, like there's like gratitude in a way, but it's just like, you know, people just asking an entitlement that they just like deserve shit for what reason? Like, what has this person ever done for me, you know? And I'm happy to help out if I can, but like, it's just like, and then they ended up coming back to me later. I said the expectation at the start. I was like, I can do this once, but I'm not going to do it again. But then, you know, a few weeks later, the person comes back and asks for more again, and stuck to my word and said, I can't help you. I'm sorry. But, you know, just shows, man, I have sympathy for these people who get like bashed online for like not giving enough money, even though they're wealthy or whatever, because the reality is like, there's so many fucking entitled people in the world, man. And they expect people to just hand out shit to them for doing fuck all. And it's like, why? Like, what have you ever done for that person? You know, like, if someone is wealthy, there's exceptions, but most of the time it's because they brought immense value to the marketplace and provided a service or a product that people enjoy and brings value to their life.
Yep.
And, you know, if someone does that, then they should enjoy the fruits of their labor. But instead, there's these entitled fuckers who come out of the woodwork and just expect people to give them money. So it's funny, man. It's interesting seeing these different sides of humanity. And
Yeah, well, it is.
yeah, I just think it's interesting.
It is, man. I think it's good to put yourself in their shoes and kind of understand who they are truly. Like, I'll admit, man, you know, when you get your first haters, when you start publishing stuff online, you know, it kind of hurts and you kind of feel like, oh, this is a bit like unjustified. And because you know deep down, you know, you've done nothing wrong, and they'll say like, I hate your hair color, or, you know, like, I hate your skin color or whatever. And I've had that in the past, and, you know, it doesn't throw me off because I'm not bothered by it, man. But if you think about it, man, people who are truly inspired on an inspired mission, who are actually going out there and delivering value to the marketplace, they're contributing, they're changing the world. You know, anyone who's doing that, they don't have time to write it, man. Like, they don't have those things. So I actually feel sorry for these people. You know, I feel like, wow, you've got nothing better to do than to sit down and to comment, man. Because who knows, man, it could be some, you know, lonely dude, you know, in his mum's basement just writing comments the whole day. And he's not on an inspired mission. So I think the core tenet is to not let it get you down, man. Just understand who they are. And the thing is, man, we've talked about it before. If someone out there says they don't like what I'm doing, I don't even know who that person is. So why would I place any weighting of any of my, you know, decisions or even any of my feelings on this person? It makes no sense. I don't even know them, man. They're hiding behind some black profile picture. Yeah. Like, so, whereas if it's someone like a mentor or a close friend or a family member who actually wants to say, you know, I think, you know, you're doing this and it's cool, I think you can make these adjustments, or I don't like what you're doing, I take it with a different liberty, you know. I'm a different approach. I'm thinking, okay, this person I respect, you know, and they've actually achieved something, so I actually want to know what they've got to say. And it's coming from a place of being constructive instead of a place of, you know, being destructive.
That's right, man. It's like you'll never be criticized by someone who's done more than you blindly. Like, you can get constructive criticism, but you'll never get like hate from someone who's doing more than you. It's always people who have done less. And you're right. Why give value to their opinion? Obviously, there's like negativity bias. Humans tend to be biased more towards negativity, but that's the thing. That's why it's so important to develop like an equanimous mindset, because the more you do, the more you achieve. There's more good, but then there's, again, everything's in balance. There's more good, but there's more bad as well, like more challenges. And so you have to be able to deal with them appropriately. And not everyone can handle them, or not everyone wants to like have those issues and stuff. Like, random people that just hate them for no reason. Like, it's not everyone's idea of a good time. Like, no one wants it, but that's just the price of achieving your dreams, I guess.
Definitely, man. I guess something like, and we've been debating back and forth for a while, is that, you could say there's two approaches, especially with a personal brand on social media. You're doing the podcast, you're showing your process and your journey. You're very active, and a part of that, you're showing, I guess, the highs, the lows, the successes, the failures, and whatnot. And that's great, man. Another perspective to look at it is that, I'll be under the radar. I won't share my successes and all this. And some people think that's a better approach because it leaves no open loops for kind of haters and people to come in. And the reality is they will find their way in, man. Eventually, you'll buy a nice house, or you'll have a nice car, and someone will see you driving maybe from school back in the day, and they just get jealous and envious, and so you can't escape it. I think that's something to remember as well, man, with like these haters and whatnot, is that as you elevate in status, you're always going to get this. And what I remember to myself, or when I think, is that if I'm not getting haters for a significant period of time, I have to question, am I growing, man? Am I actually elevating myself? And am I, moving to the next level? Because if you say stagnant, no one really cares. It's when you make those major jumps in status that people start, getting crazy and whatnot. And it's crazy, man, because I think one of the reasons why this happens, and it can happen, in friendships or relationships or family, is that people try to manipulate you. And when you elevate your status, the ways in which they used to manipulate you stop working. So that's why they get all angry, because they used to pull you down, but now you've become empowered and you've gotten out of that rut and you've elevated yourself to a new paradigm of thinking, living, and doing. So they're unable to pull you down, and that's why they start hating. So, yeah.
It's powerful, man. It's a powerful realization. And again, I think it comes back down to how you look at a situation and interpret it. And it's good to understand why. That's the thing. Like, when you actually understand objectively why people act in certain ways, it doesn't eliminate like the hurt or whatever, but you start to have empathy for people. Because like you said, man, it's like these people have like nothing going on. They're just like, very like, they're hurting and they're taking that out on someone else. And so when you actually understand that, and you actually like really viscerally know that, you can have empathy for them, because you're like, well, this guy's obviously in a bad place, Like, who the fuck would, who's like a healthy person who is like in a good place and making moves? No one who's in that sort of state, which is what like I want to be in, would ever like take the time to just randomly like try and pull someone else down, And so, yeah, I try to approach it in that manner, like just having empathy for people that obviously they've got shit going on that they haven't resolved, and that's just the reality of it. So.
That's right, man. And also it can be helpful to kind of remove yourself from the equation. If you're getting hate mail or people are pulling you down, it's easy to very well, if you haven't done that inner work, to adopt what they're saying as part of your identity and start questioning things like, wow, is this really true? Maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. And it's very insidious. It kind of seeps into you. But what you can do is remove yourself from the equation. Just go to Facebook, man. I love it, man. It's actually comedy. When I go down like major news pages in Australia and I just read the comments, like, there'll be some political article or, some companies in the news, and you just read the comments, man. And it's just full of people complaining, bitching, moaning all day. And that's not even about someone personal. They're like just taking their time to go out and, disparage someone or whatnot. And dude, I just laugh. I just read it and it's just hilarious, man. Like,
the tuna can prices.
It's true, man. Even like things like, TV shows like that sensationalist news, like, Today, Tonight, A Current Affair, that kind of thing. I don't know, man. I mean, I really believe what energy, what frequencies and what vibrations you put out is what you're going to attract. We watched a good video the other day which said, why do people have a rainy day fun? It's like, why are you expecting to manifest, this rainy day into your life? Like, obviously have some emergency savings, but you don't want it to have that specific purpose. And when I see things like that, man, it's just pure comedy to me, those shows, because I don't think it's used to purely stir people up and create drama and whatnot. I don't think it helps anyone but them. And that's why it's important to remember that they're doing this show for their interest, man, to make money and for whatever other reasons. But I don't think it's necessarily putting good energy out there, and that, it's not easy for sure. And I don't mean to speak about this from like sounding like it's easy, but I really believe if you do that solid inner work, these things just, man, it's water off a duck's back. It doesn't affect you that much because it's not true, and that deep down that you're doing good work and you're putting in the hard yards, and everything's well. So what these people are saying has no weight or no bearing. And I actually like receiving, his hate mail every now and then, man. It's actually good because it keeps me in check of where I'm at, and it shows me that, yes, I'm moving from, a different level, and developing myself even more.
That's right, man. It's almost like an indicator of progress. It's like, it's not a good thing on itself, but it's an indicator that you're doing the right things.
That's right.
So it's a good way to look at it. Yeah, it's funny, man, because, and some people might say like, yeah, okay, do the deep inner work and it's water off a duck's back, and like that sounds great. But I think as well, it shows the importance of that inner circle, because the way I see it, like, because I have like a handful of really close inner circle members, like you being one, and then a few others, and then like we all like support each other, and like we are on the same wavelength and doing the same sort of things, and so that makes it easier, because then it's like everything external, it's just like noise,
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like, sure, there's like, we can look out on this balcony here and we can see all the masses in the street, and they're like, they can say whatever they want or whatever, but it's fine. Like, we're in our zone and we're just doing what we need to do and executing.
Yes.
And so it's easy to drown that out. The problem is when your environment is not conducive to that. And this has happened to me before as well. Like, I've been in like a job where, the people I'm working with, for the most part, like fucking losers. And it's like, they're not doing anything with their life. And it's like, like I'd like be posting things to like social media or whatever. And then, you come into the office and everyone's like, oh, like, what was with that thing you did? Or like questioning about it. And you're like, fuck. You like feel shit, because it's like the people who are closest to you in that environment, like just by circumstance, are like questioning you and saying like, what are you doing? Like, who do you think you are? Blah, blah, blah.
That's right.
But then as soon as I left that environment, I had this like freedom to like, I didn't need to worry about like being judged by anyone anymore. And it gave me like that freedom and flexibility to be able to express what I wanted to express. And like, yeah, it's just, that becomes an important thing as well. Just making sure that environment's like curated properly.
Definitely, man. It all feeds into each other. And if you do find yourself, in an environment where you don't have, or you don't currently yet have a close social circle, and you don't have strong relationships or whatnot with family and friends, then yeah, it can definitely be hard. And yeah, dude, it's all about the environment. There's so many factors to consider, but yeah, dude, it's quite interesting. I mean, something else that we've been chatting about recently is, I guess, success versus fulfillment. Sorry, not success, but happiness versus fulfillment, which kind of does embody success. It's interesting, man. Some people say you should optimize for happiness. Some people close to me have actually said that, and then obviously other people have said fulfillment. I actually believe it's fulfillment, because
Can you define them both?
Yeah, sure, man. If you define happiness as feeling euphoric in the current moment, you feel present and you feel happy with what you've got. Whereas fulfillment, I see it more as a durable fulfillment. So it's a lasting fulfillment which embodies happiness, along with other things like achievement, success, contribution, giving back to the community, having good friendships, those kind of things. Having a holistically integrated life where you feel you wake up and you almost tap dance out of bed. You think life is great, and it's not a temporary thing. That's with happiness. It's more of, okay, I feel it in the moment, but if you think about it, it's almost impossible to feel happy all the time, because how do you distinguish the good emotions from the bad? Whereas fulfillment, you're not euphoric or high on those emotions, but you feel it's like a deeper sense of satisfaction in life, because it's coming from wider stuff, like you're giving back, you're pursuing your mission, and you're experiencing the benefits and the fruits of that labor.
So you would, I'm curious, so the person who said that happiness is what you should optimize for, I guess, did they have like any justification for that? Because to me, when I hear that, fulfillment, it's like the difference between like if you think of it in like a romantic context, it's like, do you want someone who is like provides like a good, like steady, or like fulfilling feeling like all the time? Or do you want someone who gives you these intense highs followed by these like peaks of like despair?
I love that.
It's like, and so to me it makes sense. It's like for your life, it's the same thing. You want it to be this consistent like fulfillment. Sure, maybe it's like you don't get the same high as someone who's like going out doing coke and having sex with hookers or whatever. But like, it's more sustainable and you don't have the peaks and troughs. And so I guess, yeah, like what was the, I guess, rationale behind that other person choosing happiness?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. I didn't challenge them too much on their view. I think they were looking at it in terms of a feeling, like you should be happy because in that moment you feel complete and you feel full. But I don't know. I should have challenged the argument a bit more, but I'm trying to challenge it as well.
Yeah, because I guess it's hard because it's one of those things where like I understand like your perspective is like by trying to optimize for happiness, like could you say like pleasure? Is it kind of what you're
Probably
defining?
experiential pleasure
Yeah.
in the moment.
By optimizing for that, you're destroying any chance of the fulfillment long term. Because, you know, like this week, I'd say it's been both, man. Like this week for us has been like fulfillment and also short term happiness. And so, but like I actually probably couldn't live the way we've lived for the past week consistently.
Why
Like
is that?
there was, well, a few reasons. There was a lot of interesting logistical things to work out, and I guess like a bit too much indulging in certain pleasures. But like, you know, so that could still exist, but I think it would have to be toned down to be a more fulfilling life. You know, like I could live in this place, I could like have these chats every day that we've had, done the work we've done the hikes, all that kind of stuff, a bit of the fun stuff as well, but maybe not quite as much of the like intense highs. And I think that would be a more fulfilling long-term thing, because it's fine doing this for like a week is great, but I definitely haven't prioritized like my health or like even like meditating and stuff like that, my routines, workouts, like hasn't been as big a priority just because I know it's only for a week.
Yeah, yep.
But if I let that continue for months or like years, it would have a really big detrimental effect on my overall fulfillment. So,
Yeah, I agree, man. I think that when I look at the two of success and fulfillment, or say happiness and fulfillment, happiness is in the moment. You know, you imagine you win the lotto or something, you feel happy, but fulfillment is more of it's like the durable sense of achievement. You know, you can really feel something tangible from it, and you might say, are they correlated? Or, you know, if you feel fulfilled, do you have to feel happy? I don't know. I feel that, you know, with fulfillment, I feel fulfilled right now in my current state, man. Like, as you said, this week's been great. You know, we've both on our mission and doing lots of things, you know. So I think that I feel fulfilled. I'm not saying that I don't feel happy. I mean, I'm not someone who feels these highs and lows. Like, I've got a relatively stable mood, and that doesn't mean it's neutral. Like, it's usually a pretty good mood. But I think it's more stable to be, you know, in that arena of fulfillment, because the happiness thing is like, you can feel happy from winning the lotto, you can feel happy from eating a pizza after you fasted for 24 hours, but if you look at that per se, you haven't actually contributed to society, you haven't bettered anyone, you know, people around you. I don't know if you've even bettered yourself. You might have made yourself, you know, worse health-wise by eating that pizza and whatnot. Whereas, you know, fulfillment, you know, you embody some of those elements of happiness, but also it's other stuff. Like, you cannot feel fulfilled just by eating that pizza. That's happiness. But fulfillment might be, okay, I've gone out and I've served these people, I've helped, you know. I do really believe there's a strong element of contribution involved. Contribution, fulfillment, and impact, you know. Because I don't know. I think that's what humans were built for, man. That, you know, we were built for giving back and contributing to something greater than ourselves. And I don't know, I've seen, you know, you've seen it in people where when they're just doing things for themselves, you know, it works in the short term, but they always burn out in the medium to long run, and it's not sustainable. Because yes, you can do things for yourself, but I think humans have a greater desire to give back, to help other people, and we're built for human connection, you know.
Yeah, we are, man. And yeah, it's interesting because I think that's what you see a lot of people go through, that cycle where initially they do things for themselves. You know, they make the money, they buy the material things for themselves, and that's like fun in the moment. But people always end up coming back to contribution. It's like, you know, like how can they find that unfulfilling eventually, and it's like, how can I then help others or give back and share that? So I think it's a good takeaway as well. It's just like keep that in mind, like to when you are like designing your life or when you're trying to optimize things, like don't just try and optimize for those material things. Because it's funny, man. It's like when you and I talk about it, it's common sense and it's obvious to us that like, you know, getting drunk on the weekend or like buying that new car or whatever, we know that that's not like a long-term sustainable way to have a good life. But some people, again, it's just different places in different people's journeys. Some people literally think that's like what will make them happy. Like they have this dream car and they think that if they can finally buy that and they can work for like 10 years and then buy it, or the dream house or whatever, then they will feel fulfilled and happy from that. And man, what a fucking rude shock when they get to that in 10 years time.
Yep.
And then they buy it and they're happy for like a month. And then it's just a fucking thing with wheels that gets them around, you know?
Yeah, well.
So yeah, it's a good reminder. Just remember to optimize for things that will bring that durable fulfillment, like you said.
Yeah, dude. I so agree with you. And I think purpose is also something, especially for guys, purpose / mission / vision, you could say, is very important to building that fulfillment, the pursuit of one's passion, you know, on that path. It's hard, man. It's hard to describe exactly what it is, but yeah, if you have your purpose, you know, it might be to, you know, bring 1,000 people out of poverty. It might be to, you know, educate people on a certain, you know, medical field area or something like that. I think because you're on your unique purpose, and one of the reasons I think people can feel depressed, and I'm not an expert on it, but I think one of the reasons is that deep down, they kind of unconsciously know there's a greater mission, there's a greater reason for them to exist on this earth, and they've got the gifts, man, because everyone has these unique gifts to give, and they have special talent in at least one area, if not more, where they can contribute to the world and make it a better place. But I really feel like that's the distinguishing factor between the happiness and the fulfillment, is that, you know, the happiness is experiential and it doesn't involve giving back at all, whereas the fulfillment is, you know, you're on that purpose, you're on that path in life. And humans, that's why they're made for accomplishment, you know, it's to give your gifts to the earth and to serve other people, and you feel good through doing that. And that's what, you know, when it's like, it's all a fair exchange, you know. When we buy something, we're buying someone else's gifts, and that was their purpose and their mission to, you know, to sell us that. And it's all like an exchange of, you could say, barter or whatnot, but it's all fair in the end of the day, because everyone is contributing their greatest gifts and whatnot. And it's interesting, man. Again, you bring up that stuff, which is so interesting, that people think that certain things will make them happy in the long run. Like, I want a better car, you know, I want this certain type of woman or whatnot. I want to do drugs on the weekend. Those things, it's so weird, man. It's kind of immature to feel that way, to think that those things will be your messiah, they'll be your savior, you know. Whereas I love Ray Dalio, you know, in his book Principles, he talks a lot in depth about meaningful work, meaningful relationships as the two main drivers. And it's so true, man. You're like, you know, humans, again, there's a good book called Social by Matt Lieberman, and he talks a lot about, you know, humans are wired for social connection. And that's why, you know, maybe through the recent pandemic, a lot of us have felt somewhat of a cabin fever, you know, being stuck at home and whatnot. But I think there's immense joy that can come out of having meaningful relationships. And it doesn't always mean romantic. I mean, you know, great friendships, great family members, you know, great other interactions. And then meaningful work. Again, I think that really ties into purpose. That, you know, you're doing something that's meaningful to you. It kind of lights your soul on fire, something that you feel passionate about. You know, we see a lot of people who are not passionate about what they're doing, and that's not always a bad thing, because sometimes we have to go through those, you know, periods of life to really, you know, see how bad things are, like we spoke about. They're the catalyst that pushes us to something even better, and that's a temporary thing. But some people always, you know, they seem to never enjoy what they're doing. And I think that it is two tenets is, the meaningful work and the meaningful relationships. You know, it's important to understand, I think universally for humans, that will lead to fulfillment. I'm not saying they're the only two things, but they're the main things. And now we see the movement to the financial independence, retire early. And it's quite an interesting concept. And we've talked about it and debated about it a lot, man, that the purpose maybe is they want to retire by 35, and their purpose is to do that. But how they will do that is through, you know, penny pinching, saving everything, you know, using index high growth funds to grow their money and whatnot, so they can retire at 35. And I think that That's it's a pipe dream. Why would you want to retire at 35? Because I'm of the view of if you really hate what you're doing, you want to escape at 35. It's not because you don't want to work. It's because you haven't found your interest. You're not on purpose. You haven't found something that lights your soul on fire. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I think we all have a unique purpose, and some of us have multiple purposes. So, what's the point of, yes, okay, if you accumulate $1 or $2 million by 35 and life's done, why would you do that? They found studies that men who retire early, they die like up to 15 years earlier because they're not fulfilled by any form of social interaction or work, and they've given up. And humans, I really believe we're wired for this meaningful work and meaningful relationships. That's why I kind of question the FIRE movement.
Oh, dude, I was going to bring that up before you did, and I totally agree, man. It's like, how... Because that's the thing. And this sort of came about with like the 4-hour work week as well, a similar sort of thing. It's like, what is... The purpose of life is not to work and pay bills and save money and then retire and then die. Like,
2.4 kids as well.
Yeah, 2.4 kids, the house in the suburbs, whatever. It's like, anyone who thinks that, and I've known people who have gone through this where, they get to the point where they don't need to work if they don't want to, but most of them end up going back to work in some form or capacity. And it's like, it is a pipe dream, man. You're so right, because you can't just like work and then retire and then just sit on the beach for the rest of your life, especially if you're 35. Like, you just can't do that, There has to be some element. Viktor Frankl says what man needs is not a tensionless state, but rather struggling towards a worthy goal,
Wow.
And I think that's so true because, and the thing with the FIRE movement is that like, that is like their worthy goal in that moment. It's like they want to retire by 35. So that's their mission. That's their purpose. And so they're motivated to work hard for it. They're on purpose. They're getting it. But the reality is it's actually a really shallow purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so once that's achieved, there's actually not really any fulfillment from that. Mm-hmm. And then what people don't talk about is that there's now this massive void in their life, which has to be filled with something. You can't just have like blank space in your life. You have to do something. And so then what are you going to do then? And so, most people might say they're going to do something else or whatever, but, it's like, why not just do that at the start? If you can't, it just doesn't work, man. Like on paper, it's maybe a good idea. It's like work till 35, doing something you hate, and then do something you love for the rest of your life. But it actually usually doesn't work that way, because what normally happens is people try to do that, but shit goes wrong. They end up spending all their money or not saving or whatever, and then they're still working at 65 in a job they hate, and they never got that like delayed life that they were hoping to get, So
Definitely.
yeah, it's interesting, man. Interesting concept, man. What else is on your mind? gone to some good places.
Yeah, man, we've covered a lot of stuff. Oh, I think networking is interesting, man. I don't know how people approach networking. Some people look at it as, I need to go out and get as many business cards and LinkedIn connection requests as I can. And that's what they see as networking. And I think it has a unique purpose, networking, and a unique definition. Like people often say it's who you know, but who knows you? That's the other question, Who's going to say, oh, well, I know James Harrison, he's doing this podcast, and people bring up your name in rooms that you're not in. That's quite powerful. We talk a lot about this, man, the concept of networking and building social capital, social equity, in a bank account, you're building things up, and it's not, for any particular purpose, but again, it goes back to meaningful relationships, not just romantic relationships, friendships, and family, but you have your outer ring, you could say. You have those professional relationships, you have, other relationships that you have. So, yeah, I don't know. What do you think? What's your definition of networking? I'm interested, and how do you think most people approach it, and is it right or not?
I love it, man. Definition. I guess my definition of networking would be I think networking is the wrong word. All it is just relationship building. And this is the thing I think a lot of people get wrong. It's like they're very like strictly like professional and strictly personal, but from what I've observed, the best networkers or the best like business people blur those lines, It's like their friends are also their business acquaintances. Their business acquaintances are also their friends, you know? And that's what I'm trying to do myself now, because when I think of it as, you know, because a lot of people think of networking, they think, what can I take from that person to help me and forward me in my mission or my purpose or whatever? But what you actually need to do is like, how can I help that person? Like, what can I give to this person? And a lot of people find it hard to wrap their head around that concept because, you know, sometimes you're trying to meet people who have done way more than you, like in a certain field, professionally, for example. And so that person might hear that and might think like, oh, like how can I offer something to them? Like they've done way more than me. Like I have nothing to offer. But, you know, that just means you need to be a bit more creative about your approach, you know?
Yep.
It's like, there's one example of a guy I wanted to meet, and he had done way more than me in like business and everything that he had worked on. He was like years ahead of me, but I wanted to meet him. And so I saw he was flying to my city, and then I offered to pick him up from the airport, you know, like he could have called an Uber if he wanted to, but you know, the offer was there and he took me up on that. So then I got to talk to him for 40 minutes when I drove him from the airport. And so, you know, I couldn't offer him anything in terms of like business, but I got to that utility of just driving him somewhere. He got the benefit of that, plus like interesting conversation with someone who was curious about him and was asking him good questions. And so, you know, it's not, you don't always have to give like a goat in exchange for a goat, you know. You can like give something else that they find valuable and in return get something. But that's the mindset it should always be. It should never be like, what can I get from that person? It's how can I offer them something to help? And that's what I've tried to do with the podcast as well, because, you know, we've said this all the time, like met some really cool people, some really interesting people through the podcast. And a lot of these people, very busy, very like semi high profile. And so, you know, you can't just necessarily like email them and be like, hey, can we grab a coffee tomorrow? Like some people would do it for sure, but most people probably wouldn't just because they're busy. But the podcast is like a way for me to offer value to them because sure, I'm not like a massive podcast or anything, but I have an audience, so I can bring them exposure.
Yep.
And, you know, people enjoy talking about themselves and their achievements. So it's like a good experience for them. They get some like clips out of it they can share, and like it looks great for them. And so that's basically what the podcast is. It's a way for me to make connections with really cool people and make friends essentially. And so that's kind of how I see networking.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. It's a great point you raised, and I really believe it that, you know, people should approach it from a perspective of giving more than they take. Like that's what I do with that's my version of networking, man. Like it's always better to approach someone when you don't need something. Like you actually don't want anything from them, you know. And I have some mentors who are, you know, I've done that.
Can you talk? That would be interesting. You don't have to name the name, but I know there's one specific one where there's been like a really like ongoing for the past few years.
Yeah, sure.
I think that'd be valuable if you're willing to.
Yeah, for sure, man. Happy to share. Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I've again, at the beginning of last year, I sat down and wrote out my mentor hit list. So I wrote about 10 names down of, you know, really high up business people who I wanted to be my mentor, and I wanted to receive, you know, some kind of mentorship from them. And it's cool, man. You know, I've been able to manifest quite a few of them. And, you know, I feel like in a typical relationship like this, someone who would approach, you know, like someone who's quite high up, they'd approach it from a place of, I want to take, like, give me this knowledge or give me a job or something like that. And, you know, I guess that's very typical. But it's interesting, man. I've, you know, had this mentor, and I have multiple ones, but this particular one works in the investing space. And it's interesting, man. We've had a few meetups, and, you know, every time I've met up with him, it's just giving, man. I'm just giving, you know. I don't want to take anything. And a lot of people will find that weird, is how can you give so much? Like, don't you want something from him? Like, you're always giving, and it's a continual thing.
What sort of stuff were you giving?
Giving obviously in the form of gifts, giving advice, you know, in fields that I'm working in, also, you know, having good conversation and those kind of things. And giving him, I guess, also what people don't understand is that, you know, if you want to find high level business people feel like I have nothing to give. Especially if you're a lot younger than the person, you have your perspective to give, you know, especially when it comes to investing. It's very important to understand, you know, all kinds of people, like especially young people, and how do they think about things, you know, in the marketplace? How does their How does that impact their buying behavior and their consumption and things like this? So I'm able to, do that. And I believe, man, it focuses, everything focuses around reciprocal altruism. So it's like, you're always giving, and you should always give more than you take. And I've never really asked anything from the mentor, and I really have no intention to, man. It's just give, and if you need something in the future, you may be able to, receive the fruits from that labor and the fruits from that giving. But that's how I love to approach networking, man. Just give and give and give and build that social equity up, rather than taking.
Yeah, man. I think it's one thing that I hear a lot of people say, which I think is true, is it's all about digging that well before you get thirsty. It's like if you want a relationship with someone and you need it tomorrow, it's way too late,
Yeah.
Because to give context, like for people who listen, this relationship with this investor guy, like it's something that has been in the works for what, like how long now? Like a year and a half or more?
A year and a half, you'd say.
Like a year and a half. And and to be clear as well, this is like a high profile person that like a lot of people would know who it is and is hard to get access to. So it's not like old mate down the road at Comsec or whatever. But it's like, so it's an achievement to even get a meeting with someone like this. And like we've talked about it off camera on some of the interactions, and like, this guy, like he knows who you are. Like you said, it's who you know and you know him, but he knows you, know?
Yeah.
And he respects you and really admires you for like your boldness and your like thoughtfulness and a lot of the stuff and the interactions that you have with him. And so, like you said, like you don't have an end game. You don't have an agenda. It's like even going back to talking about like romantic interactions. Like we don't have agendas. Like we don't want anything. We don't need anything from anyone. And it's the same in networking. Like you don't need anything from this guy. And yes, he's like an amazing person to know and a great connection to have. And I'm sure that will result in something for you down the line. But if it didn't, it wouldn't matter.
That's right.
You don't actually want anything. And people like that can tell because, like we were talking about before, as you do more, as you get a high profile, you attract all kinds of exploitative people. And so the fact that you're able to like break through that and build that connection and build that relationship over the last year and a half is, a testament to your authenticity. It's a testament to your grit and your giving, essentially. So I think it's really cool.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And I believe it's true. Like, imagine you have someone who's super successful and also super famous. They're going to have a lot of people flooding, their inbox or their mailbox or whatever, trying to get access to them. And even if hypothetically, let's say there was 1,000 people trying to reach through, 999 of them, man, they're just looking for something from them. Can I have an autograph? Can I have this? Can I meet you here? Or can you do this for me? And it's like, this person or this celebrity doesn't even know who these people are. And it's pure entitlement, man. They're like, you need to do this for me. It's like, well, why? And it's crazy, man. Like, this specific mentor, he told me, when he's hiring people, it's so easy to tell who stands out from the crowd because everyone takes such a standard approach. Like, you should hire me for this and all this. And it's like, why should he hire these people? Or what have they done to prove themselves? They've written a generic cover letter, which they've just, changed the name of the employer. They haven't customized it. They haven't stood out from the crowd. So the thing is, if that celebrity is able to look at that 999 people and sort through it, and then they can actually see there's one person who doesn't want anything from me. They're approaching me from a place of abundance, not from a place of lack. And it's crazy, man. I don't know anyone who's done this, who's been able to, cultivate a great relationship for 1.5 years plus and not ask for anything. And I have no intention to ask for anything because that's how I try to approach everything, man. Relationships and dating and business and just everything as much as I can in life is to approach it with pure abundance, not from a place of lack. Because, man, you can tell, like, as you said, if you need something tomorrow and you're it comes across in your sub-communication as very needy and you end up, bending, sacrificing your values and twisting all kinds of things, which isn't who you truly are. So I really believe it, man. Always plant that tree, 20 years before you need it, and you might say, well, is that not efficient? Because you're going to end up giving so much to people who might not be of benefit to you. But the thing is, I actually enjoy it, man. I actually enjoy cultivating, and it doesn't always have to be, high profile business people. It could be, friendships. It could be, people I don't know. I have people who learn from me. Like I got one mentee who loves to talk investing with me and, different things of self-development and all sorts of topics. And, I love giving back, man. Like for me, it's I think like the people who are quite successful for the most part, they want to give back. They want to help out if they can. But, I think it's awesome to give, man. Always, that's the motto, man. Just give, don't take. Like, sometimes you need to take and don't feel bad for that, but approach it from the mindset of like, how can I add value to them and, have that reciprocal altruism.
I love that, man. And it's like what Gary Vee says. It's like jab, 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 right hook. It's like give, and then ask,
Yeah.
So it's like it's okay to ask sometimes, but make sure you're giving way more than you're asking, and don't give with an expectation of needing something.
That's right.
Because that's where people get it wrong. They think, okay, I'll give 3 things to this person, and then on the 4th time, I'll ask them and they should give it to me. And then they get pissed off when they don't. Whereas it's like, sure, give 3 times, and then you can ask for something. But if there's a no, you should be completely equanimous about that and have no entitlement for it, because no one knows you shit. And the sooner people realize that and accept that and embrace that no one knows you fuck all, then the happier you'll be. Because here's the thing, man, when you have expectations for people, you don't have any control over anyone else except for yourself. And so when you start expecting things from people, that's like the fastest route to misery.
Yeah.
Because you have no control over your life. And I always try to say that, man. It's like taking control of your life or taking responsibility for it is hard. And people say it doesn't even make sense, because it's like, oh, like, how can you take responsibility? Like, if you lose your job because the company went under or whatever, like, that's not your responsibility, like, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, yeah, okay, you didn't directly influence that. Like, you didn't make the decision to remove yourself, but, you could have gone and networked with some people instead of fapping around watching Netflix every night.
Yeah.
You could have like set up something in case something fell through here. Life's always about choices, man. I always believe that. People aren't planting those seeds, man. That's what we're talking about here. You've got to plant seeds like constantly.
Yes.
People don't, and then they get fucked. And it's weird, man. It's like, I've been planning, like, because I put so much emphasis and value on this. I like try to plant seeds every day, like whether it's with people, whether it's with opportunities or the work I'm doing, my brand, whatever. I'm always trying to plant seeds. And, this pandemic was like a perfect example. It's like I left my job before all this, and, I didn't have anything lined up necessarily at the time, but because of all the seeds I planted, like I was able to get something, which was amazing. And I even had like other offers, like during like the pandemic, I had like companies approaching me, like, and some people would hear that and they'd be like, how's that possible? It's like such a bad economy, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, it's just a result of planting seeds. It's not because I'm amazing or anything. It's just because I've been planting these seeds, and then they were there. I didn't even need them, but they were there if I did need them. And that's just something I'm going to keep doing forever.
That's right, man. It's such a powerful thing to have. Never forget and never stop planting seeds. And I think that people need to also have the delayed gratification, that the seeds you plant today have no expectation. Not to say don't confuse that with low standards, but it's very likely that won't bear any fruit for years down the track. And we talked about that, man. You started planting seeds, I think you said almost 6 years ago. Or it's been ages, man. And, only just recently have you started to, harvest the crop, man. Harvest, some of the fruits of the seeds you planted 6 years ago. Yeah. And yeah, so good, man. Don't plant a tree if you need fruit tomorrow, but plant every day. To try and just do one thing you can, And if people might say, what's a practical example? Things like go and form a new networking relationship with someone. Go build a proper relationship with them. Maybe, just start something yourself, start a project, or just do something small that puts you, 1% better each day, and you're planting something which, has unlimited upside and the ability to really contribute to you in a positive way.
That's right, man. And I think that's worth highlighting, and thanks for bringing it up, because that's the thing to keep in mind. That was 6 years ago, It's like probably when I first started doing like self-development and working on myself. That was 6 years ago. And, people will often try things for like a month or 2 months or 6 months or even a year, and they don't get the results, and so they stop. But that's just a reminder, you know, it's like 6 months and I've still like I've done nothing, you know, like I feel like I've done nothing, but I'm just starting now just to see those little like seedlings like pop up through the ground 6 years later. And that's from just like consistently executing every single day and planting seeds every single day. And that's how long it's taken for them to even start to pop out of the ground. So, you know, and that's the thing, 6 years sounds like a long time, but you know, you might listen to this and then you wake up and suddenly it's been another 6 years, and have you gotten closer to what you wanted before? Because the time's going to pass regardless. You know, it's just whether you actually use that time to plant the seeds and start working towards what you want to have.
That's right, man. And also, I guess, planting the seeds which will grow into trees and provide unlimited upside. It's not just, you know, you plant an apple tree and you know, eat the apples and it's dead. You're planting something that's going to grow forever and it's to serve you. You know, it's the mindset of giving and encompasses all that stuff. But never forget to plant those seeds. The moment, it's interesting, man. When people get too cocky, too complacent, and then that's the start of their downfall. They stop planting seeds. And then, you know, okay, they'll be fine for a couple of more months or maybe a couple more years because they're, you know, reaping the rewards for the seeds they planted years ago. But they've stopped. And the thing is, you stop now, you can eat, but you're going to get hungry and there's going to be no food. And it's not even, you don't want to think of it like survival. I really don't think of it like that. But I think of it as just, you know, how they make sure there's multiple ways to win and limited downside. There's no downside to planting seeds. You might argue, okay, it's efficiency, you know, but you can't know. You know, when you plant these seeds, you have every hope and you know there's strong prospects for it eventuating into something. And the worst that can happen is you plant a seed, it's a great opportunity, but you've got too many opportunities to use, so you can't take it, in which case put it on the back burner, keep watering it, maintaining it if you can and whatnot, but nothing bad can come from continuing planting seeds.
That's right, man. And something that I thought was worth noting there, which you kind of hinted to, was that whenever you're like making decisions or doing things in life, you should always go for positive expected outcome, not minimizing the risk. So what I mean by that is like when you look at an opportunity, it's like if there's 10 opportunities and they all have a 90% chance of failing, but there's only a 1 in 10 chance of success, but the success from that one opportunity that works is like disproportionately high, then even though you're going to fail 9 times, it's actually worth doing that because the expected outcome is really positive, like really high. Whereas what most people do is they try to cap, all they look at is capping the downside risk or minimizing that risk.
Yes.
So it's like, yeah, okay, I can put my money in the bank because I know that I won't lose it, or in theory, but you're going to get fucking 0.5% return on interest or whatever.
Yeah,
so
dude. Wow.
Make sure whenever you're evaluating opportunities, I feel like just make sure there's a positive expected outcome and don't worry if there's like 1 or 2 failures along the way, you know?
Yeah, dude. So true. Even in a stock portfolio context, you know, so people talk about like diversification and, you know, risk weightings and stuff. Like don't let a specific stock take up more than, you know, X% of the portfolio and have 40 stocks or whatever. The thing is, if you do that, yes, you're mitigating the downside, but you're limiting the upside. And you know, for my philosophy is you should let your winners run, you know, and that can apply to life as well. You know, maybe you don't have as many companies or as many seeds planted or as many opportunities ready to be harvested and to go, but they have potential to provide unlimited upside. And you never want to cap that because you never know where it could go. It could take you to the moon and back, you know?
That's it, man. Oh, man. What else is on your mind? Anything?
Nothing that comes to mind, man. We've exhausted a lot here. What about you?
I think I'm good, man. We're coming up on 3.75 hours.
Wow.
So we've done a big one, but yeah, maybe we could just wrap up. You could let us know, I guess, what you're working towards now for the rest of 2020 and beyond. What's coming up? Yeah,
for sure, man. It's a good question. Yeah, I'm working on a fair few things. So I'm finishing off my degree as we speak. Got a fair bit to go in that. And I'm also working, doing some work online for someone that's quite high profile. And I'm enjoying the work, man. He's quite big in the digital media space. So that's one of my passions. I'm able to work with him and learn heaps, man. And, you know, work with him to bring him new business and to work to increase the business. And also, it's not just that. It's also helping people in the field. We help financial professionals in those kind of fields, also realtors, get on social media and really to drive their impact, drive their business, but also their contribution and build a strong personal brand so they're able to get out there and share their message. Because everyone has, a message inside them. Everyone has wisdom to share. It's not always just business and sales, but people might have, actual gems to share in other aspects of life. So that's what we're doing. We're working with them. So that's the main project for now. Obviously going through some inner work, as I alluded to before, and going through a few other courses that I've got, and just focusing on ensuring those basics are good, bit of health as well, and tying it all together.
Cool, man.
What about you, man?
Yeah, so for me, it's this last few months has been a bit of a down period in terms of, not a down period, but a reflective period, I think. Just making sure I'm doing the right things and working towards the right things. And, it's kind of good. I kind of feel like we're through hopefully the worst of like the pandemic now. And it's kind of like, you can almost feel like the global kind of energy is starting to like rise again in a way. You can really feel it when people are like all in lockdown, and it's like people aren't as productive, but now it's like things are starting to open up again, and it's like feeling good. And I'm happy with my projects, like the e-commerce store that I work with. We're coming into our busier period, coming to the second half of the year, so I'm just going to keep working on that, growing that with my friend. I'm going to hit the podcast hard again, starting the momentum going for that again, which will be good. And that's going to be the main focus for the rest of the year. So let's see what happens. But,
awesome, man.
Yeah, this is cool, man. It was. I knew it was going to be a long chat. almost got to the 4-hour mark, but it's like, it's funny, man. Like we came and we stayed in this place here in Sydney, and it's been a really fun week. Like we've done a lot of talking. I was saying to you earlier, like I couldn't actually count the number of hours we've had conversations with in the last week between us, but also other people we've met. And, it's good to break that routine and get into a new environment, and it helps you think differently. Because that's one thing that I've really struggled with over the past few months. It's like being stuck inside. It's like the same apartment, same routines. Like you just fall into that rut. So it was good to be able to break that for this week, and really just everything I wanted to get out of it, I got out of it, I feel like. So yeah, thanks for hanging out for the week, and thanks for coming on the podcast today. And yeah, where's the best place for people to connect with you if they want to just check you out?
Yeah, best place is probably Instagram. Username is Ryan_Tano. So that's Tano.
Cool, man.
The best space. And thanks again for having me, James. I mean, this combo has been great. This, for you guys listening, this is a typical combo of me and James. I think we've got a lot of nuggets of gold that we've dropped today, and I'm glad we're able to turn on the mics and kind of share what a typical combo is like on a daily basis for us.
Cool, man. Well, thanks again.
Thanks, James.
Let's have some wine.
Yeah, man.